Heiresses POV. They say deep in the cursed forest, once a year, a flower blooms. Glowing bright enough to grant a single wish. Dangerous enough to steal your final breath. Maybe I was foolish to believe in such a thing. Maybe chasing legends was reckless. But if that flower could free me from this life, I'd deface whatever thorns it had. The niter bit at my skin, sharp and cold. I pulled my cloak tighter, praying it would hide the sound of my heart, which pounded like a warning drum in my chest. But I couldn't turn back now. Not when I'd already stepped beyond the palace walls. I was barefoot. Breathless. Desperate. By dawn, I'd be 18. And by lore, my place would be decided. Palace guard. Staff. Soldier. Or perhaps an advisor. I had taken the test. I could pass it. But what would it matter? The idea of standing post near those blood-drinking nobles made my stomach twist. But sitting behind scrolls, whispering into the ears of monsters wasn't much better. None of those roles were made for someone like me. Because I wasn't who the world thought I was. Since the day I was born, my father decided I'd be a son. Not out of love or tradition but fear. He told everyone I was a boy. That was safer. Smarter. So I became one. Outwardly, at least. I've never worn my hair long. Never learned to braid it or tie it with silk. It's always been short, sharp against my neck, just enough to parse. The girl I was died the moment I was named. Buried under rules, under lies, under necessity. No one, not the palace, not our neighbors, knows what I truly am. Just Ares, the boy. Ares, the shadow. But tonight, beneath the cover of darkness, I was none of those things. I was just a girl chasing a rumor because it might be my only chance. I heard the story whispered by the older boys. A flower that grants the deepest wish of the one brave enough to find it. Hidden beyond the guarded lines of the cursed woods. If even a sliver of it is true. If there's even the smallest hope I can choose who I get to be. Then let the creatures of the forest come for me. Let them try. Because I've been running for myself for too long, and tonight, I'm running towards something. A miracle. A choice. A life that might finally be mine. The forest was thick with mist, the trees twisted like claws against the moonlight. Every crackle of dry leaves beneath my feet made me flinch. Still, I pressed on, one hand gripping the edge of my cloak, the other brushing branches aside. But the deeper I walked, the more the silence pressed against me. No sounds. No wind. No creatures. Only my breathing and the growing dread curling inside me. Minutes passed. Maybe hours. I don't know. But then I saw it. The same crooked tree. The same patch of silver grass. The same broken branch I'd stepped over before. No. No, no, no. I've been walking in circles, ere I whispered, heart sinking. I'm lost. Panic clawed its way into my throat. I spun around, looking for any sign, any landmark that hadn't already betrayed me. What do I do? I muttered, my voice shaking now. What do I? I turned and slammed straight into something solid. No. Someone. A gasp tore from my throat as I stumbled back, but strong arms caught me effortlessly. My hands instinctively reached out, grabbing onto his forearms hard, cold, unyielding. And then I looked up. Moonlight filtered through the canopy above, casting his face in sharp shadows. My breath caught. He was beautiful in the most dangerous way. Eyes like molten obsidian, too still, too unreadable. A nose cut with cruel precision. Full lips curled into something between a sneer and a smirk, like he'd already seen through me. He wasn't human. I could feel it. He was too still, like a statue carved from something older than time. Too silent, like the night itself bent around him. Too in control, like nothing could ever touch him without permission. His eyes didn't move. They held me there, like chains wrapped in velvet. Then, his lips parted. "Who are you?" The question was low. A whisper, almost. But it carried a weight that made the air feel heavier. His voice was rough, deep, and unsettlingly calm, like smoke curling through the cracks of a fire not yet seen. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It slid down my spine like ice. My throat went dry. My entire body tensed as I tore myself out of his grasp. He let go without resistance, as if he'd only held me because I'd allowed it. I stumbled back a few steps, heart racing, breath shallow. The distance between us felt too little. Far too little. "Why, you're not supposed to be here," I said, forcing my voice deeper, rougher. "This area is off limits." My words shook, pathetic even to my own ears. But I forced myself to meet his gaze, pretending like I hadn't already shrunk in fear. He arched a brow slowly, like I'd just amused him. Or maybe insulted him. I couldn't tell. The corner of his mouth lifted, but it wasn't a smile. No. It was something darker. Something cruel. A warning wrapped in velvet. "Is it?" His voice was low, tinged with mirth, but it carried that same weight, like gravity itself bent around him. My spine stiffened. My hands curled into fists at my sides. "You'll be arrested," I said, lifting my chin with a bravado that didn't quite reach my trembling legs. "Being here is a violation of the palace law." That made him smile for real, slow and lethal. "You mean you'll arrest me?" Before I could respond, he took a step forward. I took one back. He took two more. Silent. "Sure." I reached behind me blindly. My fingers curled around the knife tucked into my belt, the handle slick with nervous sweat. I drew it clumsily, pointing it toward him with both hands. "Turn around," I managed, my voice shaking. "I have a weapon." He stopped. Then his gaze dropped. One glance at my grip, and that arrogant smirk returned. "Go on, try me," he said, voice dipped in silken poison. "But if that's how you plan to kill me with that laughable grip, then I'm disappointed." His eyes flicked up, locking with mine, merciless. I've seen toddlers hold spoons with more conviction. My stomach sank. Shit. I blinked, and in that single heartbeat, he moved. Too fast. Too smooth. Too silent. Before I could even scream, my back hit the rough bark of a tree. The air rushed from my lungs. His hand was planted beside my head. His body loomed, inches from mine. I couldn't move, pinned not just by his arm, but by the force of him. His presence. His heat. His absolute command of the moment. He leaned in, head tilting just enough for the moonlight to catch the sharp lines of his face. His voice dropped to a whisper, one that scraped the edge of something forbidden. "What is your name, boy?" My heart was pounding so loud I was sure he could hear it. Feel it. "Aries." His eyes darkened. He didn't repeat it. He just let it settle. "Why are you here?" His voice was quiet, deadly quiet. Not shouted, Not growled, just spoken like a knife laid gently on the skin before it cuts. I opened my mouth. I. The words tangled in my throat like thorns. Because how could I explain? That I'd come looking for a flower that might not exist? That I'd risked death for a wish? That I was a lie wrapped in borrowed courage? His gaze burned into me, holding me there like I was something under glass. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe right. His arm was still braced beside my head, and the warmth of his body just inches from mine made my pulse scatter. I forced myself to look up into his eyes. Dark. Watching. Waiting. But he wasn't impatient, he was amused. Like he already knew I was about to lie. Like he'd enjoy hearing it. You, he prompted, one brow rising just enough to make the air feel thinner. I clenched my fists at my sides. I heard there's something in the forest. His expression didn't change, but the air around him did. It got heavier. Still. Something. A flower, I whispered. They said it grants wishes. Silence. Then he laughed. Once. Low and sharp and without an ounce of kindness. So you came all this way, he said, his voice curling around the words like smoke, into restricted territory, just to chase fairy tales? I stiffened. I didn't mean. You didn't mean to get caught. He leaned in closer. I shrank back into the bark of the tree, but there was nowhere left to run. Tell me, Aries, he said, his voice dropping to a low whisper as his lips brushed near my ear. What did you come here wishing for so badly that you were ready to die for it? I shut my eyes, fighting the flush rising to my cheeks and the words threatening to spill. My throat tightened with the effort not to speak. Freedom, I wanted to say. Choice. A life of my own. But I stayed silent. When I opened my eyes again, he pulled back just enough to see my face close, but still just out of reach. I caught the faint glow in his eyes, like embers glowing deep in a dark fire. He studied me slowly now, like a hunter deciding if his prey was worth the chase. His next words scraped low against my spine. You're a terrible liar. My breath hitched. I should have looked away. Should have apologized or run. But the heat in my chest twisted into something stubborn, and I bit back. I could ask you the same thing, I snapped, defiance sharpening my voice. Why are you here? The moment the words escaped, regret flickered at the edge of my mind. He tilted his head slightly, as if surprised by my boldness. His lips curved something dark, unreadable. You ask questions like you're owed answers, he said, voice low and smooth. But this place, it's not safe for you. My throat tightened. My heart thundered, but I met his gaze. He took a step closer, and I felt the bark press into my back again. I'm here because I want to be, he said calmly, voice carrying a quiet authority without revealing anything. No fairy tales. No wishes. Then, his eyes narrowed just a little, something dangerous flickering there. And now, he added, voice dropping, I have a distraction I didn't expect. I froze. A distraction? His breath brushed against my ear, warm and cold all at once. Go home, little boy, he whispered, his voice low and edged with something dangerous. Before I decide to keep you here. I didn't need to hear it twice. My heart pounding like a drum in my chest, I turned on my heel and ran, feet barely touching the ground, lungs burning with each desperate breath. Strangely, the forest seemed to part for me. The shadows no longer tangled like before. My feet knew the way home all along. Before I knew it, the cursed forest was behind me, and the cold night air filled my lungs. I hadn't been lost at all. But something had changed. Something inside me whispered that this was only the beginning. Aries' POV. Today was the day. The day I would be chosen to become either a palace guard or an official advisor. I passed the grueling tests for the advisor role. My mind replayed every question I answered, every strategy one memorized. Yet, none of that mattered. The final decision wasn't mine to make. It was up to the magistrate. I stood in front of the cracked mirror in a small, dimly lit room. The thin glass distorted my reflection, but I didn't care. I tugged at the simple linen tunic, the worn belt cinching it at my waist, and adjusted the matching trousers. Nothing fancy, just the plain uniform of our class. A flicker of yesterday night flashed in my mind, the stranger in the forbidden forest. Who was he? How had he gotten so close to the palace grounds, to a place no one dared enter? I shook my head sharply, pushing the thought away. Focus. I took one last look at my reflection, a boy's face, carefully kept hidden behind years of lies. And then, with a breath steadying the storm inside me, I stepped outside. The morning air was cool but heavy with tension. Just a few steps from our small house, the palace grounds opened into a wide courtyard, stone paving worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. Already, dozens of boys stood in perfect rows, their faces set with nerves or pride. I slipped silently behind a tall boy near the back, trying to disappear into the crowd. The magistrate's arrival was announced by the soft clip of boots echoing off the stones. He appeared at the far end of the courtyard, tall and imposing, draped in a black coat that whispered authority. His shirt was crisp, tucked neatly into tailored pants, and his eyes scanned the assembly like a hawk. Silence fell immediately. He stopped at the center, raising a hand. Today, his voice was calm yet carried across the courtyard like a command. You all turn 18. Today, you will be assigned your parts. Some of you will serve as guards, sworn to protect the bloodline. Others will become advisors, guiding the throne's decisions. Some will defend our nation as soldiers, while others will serve as palace staff, supporting the palace in various duties. My heart pounded like a drum in my chest. The choice, he continued, is not yours. It belongs to me. I will judge where each of you belongs. He paused, eyes locking onto mine, or so I felt, and I swallowed hard. Step forward when I call your name. One by one, the magistrate began calling names. Lauren Vess, he said, his voice cutting through the stillness. Lauren stepped forward, chest straight, eyes steady. The magistrate nodded once, sharply. Advisor. A murmur passed through the crowd. Lauren's jaw clenched, but he accepted the title. Next. Aaron Talos. Aaron's face was tight with anticipation. He moved forward, head held high. Guard. The crowd shifted as the weight of the words sank in. I clenched my fists at my sides, my breath shallow. Every name after felt like a hammer pounding my nerves. Cale Rennick. Soldier. Davin Mailer. Palace Staff. The magistrate's eyes swept over us like a storm rolling in. Then, silence. A pause. And then my name. Aries Ren-Eve Wren. My heart slammed against my ribs as all eyes turned to me. I stepped forward, muscles tense. The magistrate's gaze lingered longer than the others. He said nothing. A breath hung heavy in the air. Then, finally, advisor. Even though I didn't want any of this, Hearing the magistrate say advisor, it stirred a small flicker of hope inside me. It wasn't the life I dreamed of, but it was still better than standing guard or becoming a soldier, anything but being close to those bloodthirsty creatures. But then, suddenly, a guard burst through the gathered crowd, his steps hurried and urgent. He stopped beside the magistrate and leaned in close, whispering something sharply into his ear. The magistrate's eyes flicked up, locking onto mine. Time slowed. His gaze was unreadable, cold, and calculating, like a blade hovering just above my heart. He gave a slight nod, just enough for the guard to step back. The murmurs around the courtyard grew into a ripple, then a wave, as the magistrate's voice rang out again. Aries Ren Ren, he declared, the sound loud and clear. You are hereby assigned as the personal servant to the Prince Emmerich Salvan Marquez. The world spun. My heart stopped. Every muscle in my body froze like ice. Blood rushed to my face, burning my cheeks with sudden, scorching heat. My palms grew slick with sweat. The whispers surged into a roar, a mix of surprise, shock, and something darker I couldn't quite place. I forced myself to stand still, though my legs threatened to give way. The title personal servant to the prince felt like a chain around my neck. The prince. The untouchable, the feared. Emmerich Salvan Marquez. The name alone held power, danger, and a promise of nothing but hardship. I swallowed hard, the weight of my new reality settling over me like a suffocating shadow. This wasn't just a new assignment. This was a sentence. The magistrate's voice cut through the murmurs, sharp and commanding. You all start from today. Aries, you come with me. I have instructions for you. My throat tightened, and I barely managed to choke out the words, trying to keep my voice steady, trying to control the storm inside. Yes, sir. Every step felt heavier than the last as I followed him deeper and deeper into the heart of the palace. The cold stone walls seemed to close in on me, whispering secrets I wasn't meant to hear, sealing my fate with each echoing footfall. His voice broke through the haze. You must be wondering how you came to be the princess servant. I said nothing. Of course, I was wondering. The princess servants were supposed to be seasoned people in their 30s or 40s, people with years of experience and loyalty proven through decades. Not a mere boy on the cusp of adulthood. At least, that's what I have heard around. Then, why me? Why now? The magistrate's expression softened for a fraction of a second, just enough for me to catch it before the weight of duty reclaimed his features. Your father was the man the prince trusted most. A loyal guardian, advisor, and friend. My heart clenched at the mention of him, my father, whose absence had left a hollow ache I tried not to show. But he is no more. He paused, letting the words sink into the heavy silence between us. You would have been the rightful heir to his position, guardian, protector of the prince's life. I felt a flicker of hope only to have it crushed instantly. But, he continued, voice low and steady, you are not yet experienced enough. Nor fit for such a responsibility. The weight of his words settled deep in my chest. So the decision was made, to place you where you can be watched, and where the prince can have someone close, someone he can learn to trust. He looked me squarely in the eyes. And who better than his own son? The world tilted. My breath hitched. Son. That word always lands like a weight on my chest. Heavy. Sharp. Wrong. I've been living that lie since birth, wearing it like armor, like a curse. My father's decision. My burden to bear. No one had ever questioned it. No one dared. And now, it had brought me here. To this palace. To him. to a fate I couldn't escape. Of course, you aren't fit to be his guard, the magistrate added, like he was reading from a list. You're not trained for combat. You've never seen blood. He paused, his voice turning more clinical. And you're too young, too untested, to advise a prince. You wouldn't survive a week in court. I said nothing. I couldn't. He continued. But as his servant? You'll be close. You'll observe. You'll earn his trust, like your father did. Aries' POV. All you have to do, the magistrate said, his voice firm but dismissive, is bring him his meals 3 times a day, clean his quarters, and keep your head down. That's it. He paused, looking me over like I was just another tool to be used. Unless he asks for something else, you don't speak. You don't act. You only obey. I nodded, stiffly, though my throat was tight with nerves. My hands fidgeted at my sides, but I forced them still. I couldn't let the panic show, not when the walls felt like they were already closing in. With a curt nod, he stepped past me and gave a half-hearted pat on my back. It was meant to be reassuring, I think. It wasn't. Then, without another word, he disappeared down the hallway, his footsteps growing fainter with each second until it was just me. Me and the door. The princess door stood tall and still before me, carved from dark, lacquered wood and etched with a crest I didn't dare stare at too long. It loomed like a warning. No guards. No advisors. No noise. Just silence. They told me he lived on the top floor, secluded, untouched, and almost never seen. His chambers spanned half the palace wing. A place no one visited. A place people feared. And now I was standing in front of it. Alone. I stared at the handle, my fingers twitching. This wasn't just a room. This was the mouth of the lioness den. And I'd just been thrown in. I stared at the door for a second longer, then exhaled shakily. Just knock. My knuckles hovered for a heartbeat before I tapped lightly, barely audible. No response. I waited. Still nothing. Maybe he wasn't inside. Or maybe he just didn't care. I swallowed and, with trembling fingers, reached for the iron handle. It was colder than I expected. The kind of cold that seeps into your skin. The door creaked open slowly, reluctant. Like even it was warning me to turn back. But I stepped in. And froze. The air shifted the moment I entered. Heavy. Still. Too quiet. His chamber was vast, dark stone walls stretched high, broken only by narrow glass windows stained with red and silver. Thick black drapes blocked most of the light, casting long shadows across the floor. A single fireplace crackled at the far end, its glow barely reaching the edges of the room. Everything was cold and immaculate. Too perfect. A large bed with obsidian frames stood in the center, unrumpled. To the right, an arched desk with ancient books and scrolls. And to the left, a black table where silver dishes waited for the meals I would have to bring. But where was he? I took a cautious step into the princess chamber, the heavy door clicking shut behind me with a soft finality that made my heart jolt. The silence inside was thick, untouched. No sound. No presence. Good, I thought, letting out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. He's not here. Relief washed over me like a tide, slow and temporary. I glanced around quickly, scanning the room. Everything was pristine. The bed was made, the desk neatly arranged, not a speck of dust in sight. I shifted awkwardly, unsure of what to do. No one had told me exactly how I was supposed to begin. Do I just wait? Was I even allowed to sit? I looked at the polished chair near the window, then at the floor. Maybe it's safer to stand. Or crash. The sharp sound of ceramic shattering jerked me out of my thoughts. Of ours. I spun around instantly, eyes wide, heart hammering in my chest. The broken pieces lay on the floor by the far wall, but there was no one in the room. My throat tightened. Before I could move or make sense of it, a voice low, calm, and far too close cut through the still air. Why are you here? I froze. There was still no one. But his voice was unmistakable. Deep. Laced with something dark. It came from everywhere and nowhere all at once. My mouth went dry. My hands were clammy as I swallowed. Hard. Was it the prince? I'm your new servant, I stammered, forcing the words out of my mouth. Ares. A long pause. Then. Interesting. That word made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Why was it interesting? Why did he sound like he already knew me? I gasped as I was suddenly yanked backward too fast to react. A strong hand wrapped around my throat, not choking but firm enough to make my breath hitch in terror. My back slammed lightly into something solid, a chest. Warm breath brushed my ear. And then I saw him. In the tall mirror across the room. Him. The man from the forest. The one I had stumbled into. The one who had cornered me like a predator. His reflection stared back at me, his face half-shadowed, but unmistakable. No. No. It couldn't he be. He couldn't he be. He leaned down slowly, letting me see him clearly this time. Same sharp features. Same piercing, unreadable gaze. Same cruel curve to his lips. You, ere I whispered, voice barely audible. My limbs went cold. You're the... His smirk deepened, but he didn't answer. Of course he didn't because that would give too much away. But I knew. My thoughts raced, chaotic and horrified. The man from last night was the one I had been assigned to serve. And he was the prince. Emmerich Salvan Marquez. The hybrid heir. And I had threatened him with a knife. Argued with him. Stared him down like an idiot child in a forest I shouldn't have been in. I tried to speak, to apologize, to breathe, but nothing came. He leaned closer, his voice a whisper at my skin. I told you to run, didn't I? Ares SPOV. I told you to run, didn't I? His breath brushed against my skin, warm and deadly, and every part of me froze. I could barely speak. My lips parted, dry and trembling, as I forced the word out like a prayer. Prince. The moment I said it, shame curled through me like smoke. I sounded pathetic. Foolish. And still I cast my eyes down immediately, unable to meet his gaze now. Not again. I had broken so many rules. I wasn't just standing in front of royalty, I had threatened him. Argued. Stared him down like we were equals. I'd drawn a knife on the crown prince of the realm, and hadn't he even known it. And now I was in his room. Alone. With his hand still wrapped firmly around my throat. What have I done? Who sent you here? He growled, and this time his voice wasn't quiet. It thundered in the silence like a blade slamming down on stone. I flinched, instinctively shrinking back, but there was nowhere to go. The wall pressed against my spine, and still he didn't release me. I was assigned by the magistrate, I gasped, barely managing the words through the tight grip on my throat. He said you needed someone. The magistrate? He repeated, scoffing like the very title was poison. Then his voice turned colder. Sharper. So you expect me to believe this is all coincidence? That you just happened to wander into the forbidden forest where no one dares to tread, and the next day, you're conveniently placed in my quarters by the court? His eyes blazed now, more molten metal than human. You think I'm a fool? He spat. Someone sent you. Someone planted you. Don't insult me with lies. No, I swear, I said quickly, panic clawing up my chest. I swear on my life I didn't mean. Exactly. Your life. His voice dropped to a hiss now, venom wrapped in silk. I should ended it then and there. My heart stopped. He meant it. Every word. His fingers flexed slightly around my throat, enough to make the air thin and my pulse throb. My eyes burned. Terror surged up my spine as he leaned closer again, his mouth next to my ear, soft and brutal. But don't worry, he whispered, I guess fate just wants me to kill you today, right here, right now. His mouth parted. I saw the glint first sharp, ivory, glistening under the faint golden light of the chandelier above. Fangs. Real ones. Not like the ceremonial ones the palace guards wore in costume for the Festival of Blood. These were alive, edged with death. My heart stopped. And then I felt him. His breath against my neck. Hot and cold. A contradiction, like everything else about him. His lips brushed just slightly over my skin, and a violent shiver ran through me. This was it. I was going to die. Torn open by a prince I hadn't even known was a prince until a few minutes ago. For trespassing. For arguing. For existing where I didn't belong. I shut my eyes tight. And just before his fangs pierced skin, I blurted the only thing I could think of. I'm Maverick's son. I choked out, my voice raw and desperate, cracking in the middle. Everything stopped. Everything. The air went still. He didn't move, didn't even breathe. But I could still feel him. His lips were motionless at my neck, but his fangs stayed there, ghosting across my skin like the final edge of a storm. I opened my eyes slowly. And there he was. Still inches away, but no longer on the attack. His expression had changed. His fangs were still out, his jaw still tight, but his eyes were staring right into me. Obsidian black, bottomless, and cold, but filled now with something I couldn't name. Recognition? Confusion? You're his son? He asked finally, low and dangerous, like he didn't quite believe it. I nodded. Slowly. Careful not to move too fast. Like I was still one wrong breath from death. His gaze narrowed. And then after a beat, his hand loosened from my neck. The pressure was gone, and so was the fire choking my throat. I stumbled forward, gasping softly, steadying myself on the edge of a nearby table. But he didn't reach for me again, as his fangs slowly retracted back into his gums. Then, he stepped back. Silent. Measured. Like a predator retreating, not because the prey escaped, but because he let it. My fingers trembled at my sides. My lungs ached with the breaths I'd forgotten to take. But I didn't speak. Neither did he. We just stood there in silence, the air between us charged, sharp with everything that had almost happened. And everything that still could. Why are you here? He asked again, his voice lower now, but no less cold. The magistrate, I began, keeping my eyes lowered to the floor. He assigned me. I know that, he snapped, cutting me off. You already said it. What I want to know is why you're a servant. You're just what? 18? My throat bobbed. This is what? Let me guess, he growled. The magistrate said so? Yes, Prince. A pause. Then he muttered under his breath sharp, angry. Fuck him. My eyes widened slightly at the profanity, but I didn't dare look up. I stared at the polished marble floor as his footsteps shifted. From the corner of my vision, I saw him run a hand through his hair, sweeping back the pale blonde strands that cascaded past his shoulders. Not cropped or tidy, just long enough to fall over his chest when he moved, framing his face with a dangerous kind of elegance. Justy, his voice returned, rough and clipped. Just stay out of my sight. I don't want to see you. With that, he turned sharply and disappeared through the arched door leading into his office, still within the same chamber, but separated by a heavy curtain and a carved wooden frame. The door didn't slam, but the finality in his retreat might as well have been a wall. I stood frozen. What was that? Was I supposed to wait here now? Or leave? He said he didn't want to see my face, and I wasn't sure if that meant I should go. But I didn't want to risk angering him further. Quietly, I turned and slipped out of the room, the door closing behind me with a soft click. The hallway was silent, empty. Where am I even allowed to go? Before I could figure it out, a woman rounded the corner walking fast, her boots clicking sharply against the stone floor. She looked human, though pale like the rest who worked near the vampires. Her eyes swept over me like a gust of wind. You're the new servant assigned to Prince Emmerich? She asked briskly. Yes, I said, straightening instinctively. Then what are you doing outside his quarters? He said he didn't want to see me, so I thought. It doesn't matter what he said. You're not allowed to leave that room unless it's to fetch food during mealtimes, or he calls for you. I blinked, stunned. So I stay in there all the time? Yes. Day and night. That's your post now. Where do I sleep? She gave me a sharp look, as if the answer should have been obvious. On the floor. By the wardrobe. There's a servant cot folded beneath it. Oh. You serve him 3 times a day. Meals will be prepared already. You do not make anything. You do not speak unless spoken to. You do not meet his eyes. And unless you're given an order directly from the prince himself, you do not leave that room. Understood? Yes, Maram, I mumbled, throat dry. She sighed, adjusting the cloth bundle she was carrying. It's his breakfast time. Take the tray from the eastern kitchen and bring it to him. You're late. I nodded quickly, already turning to go. And next time, the woman called after me, her voice sharp and without a hint of sympathy. Don't wander. He may not be merciful again. Yes, Maram, I whispered. She gave a final nod and turned down the corridor, her steps brisk and uncaring. I stared after her for a second before sighing and heading the opposite way. Toward the eastern kitchen. Wherever that was. I stared after her for a second before sighing and heading the opposite way. Toward the eastern kitchen. Wherever that was. Of course, the elevator was off limits to humans. Only vampires were permitted to use it without explicit permission. And me? I was just a lowly servant assigned to the prince. I was currently on the 45th floor. I looked at the stairwell door with dread. 45 floors. I swallowed hard and pushed the door open. The stairs were steep and winding, narrow between cold, stone walls. The first few floors were bearable. But by the 19th, my body was screaming. My legs trembled with every step. My breaths were sharp, shallow, wheezing in and out. I couldn't eat anymore. With my hands shaking from effort and my foot throbbing from earlier, I sank down onto one of the steps, curling my arms around myself and trying not to cry. And then, who told you that you're allowed to sit, you filthy human? The voice cracked like a whip against my ears. I bolted upright, pain flaring in my legs, my heart leaping into my throat. A tall vampire man stood in front of me, his presence radiating cold authority. His expression twisted with disgust. "I'm sorry, sir." Before I could say more, his hand shot out and grabbed me by the collar. He yanked me up and slapped me hard across the cheek. Stars burst behind my eyes. "You speak when we say you can," he spat, eyes narrowed with cruel delight. "Did you forget the rules already?" I kept my head bowed, biting the inside of my cheek to keep the tears down. The side of my face burned. "Speak." "I'm sorry, sir," I managed, barely above a whisper. He sneered. "What is your name?" "Aries." "Aries?" His brows rose. "You're the new servant assigned to Prince Emmerich?" "Yes, sir," I murmured, trying to make myself smaller. He tilted his head, studying me now with something worse than contempt. "You don't look older than 18. "I just turned 18. 18, he repeated with a smirk, as if the word itself amused him. "That explains it. That's why you look so timid. So small." His gaze lingered. I wanted to disappear. Then he said it. "You're to come to my room. At midnight." My stomach turned. "What?" I froze. My tongue wouldn't move. "Did you hear me?" He barked. "Yes, sir. I live here on the 19th floor. If you forget, ask around. The name is Matteo. And if you don't show up," he leaned in, voice like poison, "I'll make sure you don't see the next sunrise." He let go of me with a shove and walked off, his laughter echoing faintly in the stairwell. I stood there, rooted, every inch of me shaking. My chest ached with the pressure of held-in sobs. Why me? Why did he want me in his room? Why was everything in this place a threat? But I couldn't cry. Not here. Not where anyone could see. I swallowed my fear, clenched my fists, and forced myself to keep going down. The pain in my leg was sharper now, like a knife pressing against the bone. But I couldn't stop. I couldn't risk angering anyone else. Finally, I reached the ground floor and found the eastern kitchen tucked behind the storage hall. The moment I stepped inside, a young man who looked about my age turned from a long table, holding a silver tray. "You're here for the princess food?" "Yes," I rasped. He didn't ask more. He handed me the tray without a word, and I took it with shaking hands. "Now what?" I thought miserably, staring at the stairs again. There was no way I could climb all the way back up with this. Then I heard it. Aries. His voice. I turned slowly, clutching the tray tightly to my chest. Prince Emmerich stood near the hallway entrance, watching me with his usual unreadable expression. I dropped my gaze immediately. Come with me, he said. I nodded, falling into step behind him. But as we neared the elevator, I hesitated. My feet refused to move forward. My body locked in place. He stepped inside, turned slightly, and looked back. What? He said, impatient now. I am not permitted to use the lift, Your Highness, I said quickly, I still fixed to the ground. Humans aren't allowed. You follow my rules, he said, voice hardening. And from now on, you use this. If anyone has a problem with it, they can take it up with me. His hand reached out and pressed against the door to keep it from closing. Come on. For a second, I hesitated. And then I moved. My feet carried me into the lift, past that invisible line I didn't know I was allowed to cross. I didn't lift my eyes not even once. But I could feel his presence beside me. Close. Commanding. Dangerous. Who was it? His voice came low and sharp, an unmistakable growl that rolled with fury. I flinched. Before I could even grasp what he meant, his hand shot forward. The tray slipped from my grasp and clattered against the elevator floor, food spilling across the polished surface. The shock barely had time to register before my back hit the mirrored wall with a dull thud, and his hand gripped my jaw, forcing my chin up. I dared not meet his eyes. But the tremble in my body gave me away. I asked who it was. His tone dropped further, dangerously quiet. Look at me and tell me. Now. My lips parted to speak, but no words came. I said, look at me. His voice cracked through the air like a whip. My eyes rose slowly, shakily meeting his glowing crimson gaze. The fury swirling in them was cold, precise, and terrifying. His other hand moved up. Gently. Almost mockingly. His fingers traced the spot on my cheek where Matteo's slap still burned. Who did this to you? I hesitated, chest tightening with fear. I fell. I lied. His fingers instantly tightened around my jaw, not enough to bruise, but enough to make me wince. I hate liars, he hissed, his breath ghosting over my skin. So you better tell me the truth now. Because if I find out on my own, I will kill every last person in this place. And it will be on you. The breath I was holding escaped in a soft gasp. Sir M. Matteo. The name barely left my throat. And Emmerich exploded. Matteo? That bastard? He dared lay a finger on my servant? I'll rip his goddamn throat out. He spun away from me, pacing the elevator like a caged predator, fists clenched, fury radiating off him like waves of heat. Then he turned again. What else? Did he do anything else? I swallowed hard. And no, he just said he wanted me to come to his room. At midnight. Silence. Complete, crushing silence. Then, that fucking perverted bastard. Emmerich's snarl echoed through the elevator. His hands slammed against the mirrored wall, cracking the surface in 2 places. I jolted back instinctively. Who the hell told you to leave my chamber, here? I froze. He was glaring at me now, his eyes still glowing, pupils razor thin. You said you didn't want to see me, so I thought. You stupid boy, he roared. I didn't know Maverick had raised such an idiot for a son can't even follow basic instructions. I'm sorry, I stammered. Sorry? How many fucking times have you apologized since you stepped foot into this palace? This place isn't for soft, clueless kids who can't even handle themselves. His words hit like slaps. I want to be there every time someone tries to hurt you. I'm not your fucking father. Don't expect me to babysit you or protect you like one. My eyes welled, stinging, the tears blurring my vision. I bit my tongue to stop the sob from escaping. He noticed. And he hated it. Now you're crying, he spat, disgusted. Be a fucking man. You look so fucking small and timid already. Even your voice, do you even realize how much you sound like a damn girl? That one hit harder than any slap. I lowered my head, the tears I tried to hold back spilling freely now. I couldn't stop them. My chest ached from the effort of keeping silent. I didn't respond. I couldn't. The elevator chimed. We arrived. He stepped out without another word, leaving me behind with the shattered tray, my dignity in pieces among spilled fruit and broken porcelain. I knelt down, slowly picking up the scattered mess with trembling hands, wiping at my eyes with the back of my sleeve as I forced the sobs back down my throat. When I finally entered his chambers again, he didn't spare me a glance. I'm going to take a bath, he said, his voice cold, detached, as though the previous moment never happened. Get my clothes from the wardrobe. I paused at the threshold of his room, still gripping the broken tray. My body hurt. My face stung. My pride felt crushed beneath the soles of every step I had taken since entering this place. But I moved. Because I had no other choice. Aries SPOV. I stood in the center of the princess room, holding a freshly pressed white shirt and a pair of black trousers in my arms. The sound of water echoed from the bathroom, steady and endless, as if he were trying to scrub away something deeper than just sweat or blood. I kept my gaze pinned to the floor, not daring to glance toward the door. I wasn't sure how long I stood like that, stiff, aching, waiting, but eventually, the water shut off. My fingers tightened around the fabric. He was coming out. I lowered my gaze even more, heart hammering, as the bathroom door opened and a warm wave of steam rolled out. Give it to me, he said simply. I took a shaky breath and stretched my arms forward, still keeping my eyes down like I was told to. But that wasn't enough. What are you doing? His voice came sharp, irritated. I'm standing right here, and you're handing it to me from across the damn room. You want water all over the floor? I stumbled forward in response, closing the space between us. My arms trembled as I stretched them out again, offering the clothes properly. But he didn't take them. You know what? Let it be. His voice was laced with contempt. You're of no fucking use. What the hell was that bastard magistrate thinking, assigning you to me? I bit the inside of my cheek. I'm talking to you. Can you at least look at me and say something? I hesitated just for a second before slowly lifting my gaze. And then I froze. My lungs collapsed. My eyes widened in panic. He was naked. Utterly, completely, unapologetically naked. And I like a fool screamed. Aha! A scream not of anger or disgust, but pure panic. Because I'm not a boy. I'm not what he thinks I am. I'm a girl standing in front of a towering vampire prince whose bare, wet body was mere inches from mine. And then it got worse. His hand slammed over my mouth before my voice could echo beyond the walls. His body pressed into mine, pinning me against the nearest wall, damp heat radiating from his skin. A single bead of water from his dark hair slid down his neck across his chest and fell onto my collarbone. Too close. Too close. What the fuck are you doing? He snapped, his hand muffling my screams. Is this the first time you've seen a naked man or what? My eyes widened even more. He was furious and confused. But if only he knew the truth. That I wasn't some fragile, sheltered boy but a girl, trembling beneath the weight of his naked body, feeling everything pressed into me, from the hard wall at my back to the very clear line of contact between us. "Are you serious right now?" he muttered, voice low and dangerous. "You're a guy, aren't you? What's the big deal? It's just a body." "No, Prince Emmerich. That's the problem." To him, it was just a body. To me, it was a disaster. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't move. And my skin was burning. "Now stop screaming," he growled, his breath hot against my cheek. "Or I'll give you something to scream about. I don't need the guards thinking I'm skinning you alive in here." He leaned in, his voice a low threat. "Gonna keep your mouth shut or not?" I nodded frantically, his palm still pressed firmly over my lips. After a tense second, he finally released me. I gasped, but kept my head bowed low, heart rattling like a war drum in my chest. My hands were still clutching the clothes, damp now from the steam and my own shaking. I didn't dare look again. Not even a glimpse. He snatched the clothes from my hands with a sharp jerk and turned away, muttering curses under his breath as he dressed. I didn't move. Just stood there. Silent. Frozen. Embarrassed. Terrified. Minutes passed. The sound of fabric being pulled over skin. Of buttons fastened, cuffs straightened, and boots stepped into. Then, without another word, his voice returned sharp, composed, back to its usual cold authority. "I will be in the office," he said flatly. "Don't leave this room." I nodded once, eyes still fixed on the floor, too afraid to speak, too shaken to disobey. With that, he turned sharply and disappeared through the arched door, his footsteps fading into the softer floor of his private study. The curtain swayed slightly in his wake, then stilled. And finally I could breathe. I staggered back until my knees hit the edge of the velvet couch, then slowly lowered myself onto it. My entire body trembled. My hands were still clammy from holding his clothes. My lips still felt the weight of his palm. My heart hadn't stopped racing since that moment he pinned me to the wall. What was I thinking? What was I doing here? This place, this palace, it wasn't meant for someone like me. And Emmerich. He was dangerous in ways I couldn't name. Not just because of what he was, but because of how he made me feel this overwhelming, suffocating confusion I wasn't ready to face. I wasn't safe here. I wasn't safe anywhere. I buried my face in my hands, letting the silent tears fall now that no one was watching. The slap from Matteo still stung. My legs ached. My throat was raw from the scream I couldn't stop. And my mind was spiraling. I couldn't go to that vampire's room at midnight. But what would happen if I didn't? And Emmerich, he was angry. Furious, even. But that didn't mean I could rely on him. He'd made that clear he wasn't my savior. He wasn't my protector. He wasn't anything to me. And yet, the way he reacted, the way he looked when I said Matteo's name like he'd murder him without hesitation. That wasn't nothing. I wiped my eyes quickly, swallowing down the rest of the panic. I didn't have time to fall apart. Not here. Not when I didn't know who would walk in next. From behind the curtain, I could hear papers shifting, something being poured into a glass, and the quiet drag of a chair. Emmerich was working now. As if the last 10 minutes hadn't happened. I looked down at my self-wrinkled uniform and damp sleeves from where his hair had dripped onto me. I looked like a mess. But I couldn't change. I didn't even know if I was allowed. I tucked my legs up onto the couch and curled into myself, staring at the ornate carpet and trying not to think about midnight. Trying not to think about Matteo. Trying not to think about Emmerich voice and his eyes and his body, and I forced my thoughts to go silent. Sleep. That was the only way to survive this night. But I didn't dare close my eyes. Not yet. Not while I was still wearing the scent of his skin. Aries SPOV. Aries. My eyes snapped open the moment I heard my name. The velvet beneath me shifted as I jerked upright, heart hammering. My vision took a second to adjust, but there he was. Prince Emmerich. Standing right in front of me. His arms crossed, his sharp eyes narrowed in something unreadable. His presence felt like a blade cold, sharp, and far too close. I was still on the couch. Sleeping. I stood up so fast I nearly tripped over myself. My hands rushed to smooth out my uniform, my mouth already fumbling for an apology. He spoke before I could. Why are you still here? Don't you want to go and take a bath or something? I hate unhygienic people. That was what he was mad about? Not that I had dared to sit worse, sleep on his couch? Not that I had fallen asleep in his chambers, without permission? I blinked, thrown off. Where am I supposed to go, Prince? His brow twitched. Now I gotta answer you, too? I seriously don't know who's serving who here. Are you my servant or the other way around? No, I didn't mean it like that, I swear. Of course you didn't he muttered, rolling his eyes. There's a men's shower for servants. You'll find it on the 17th floor. No. My stomach dropped like stone in water. Men's shower? He raised a brow, growing visibly annoyed. Yeah. Or do you want to bathe with the ladies or something? I paled. I couldn't bathe with the men. I couldn't be seen undressing. I couldn't risk someone noticing the very obvious detail that I wasn't a boy. I clutched my hands tightly to stop them from shaking. No. I didn't mean that, I just... You didn't mean that? He echoed mockingly. Then what do you mean? I gulped, my voice turning quiet. I have this phobia. Of being around too many people while bathing. I've always bathed alone. I can't really do it in front of others. His stare didn't soften. He just blinked at me like I'd told him I was afraid of towels. And, he said flatly, what am I supposed to do with this information? Nothing. My voice cracked, barely holding on. I just thought you should know. In case I take a little longer, or... never mind. Leave. And take the elevator. I didn't wait to be told twice. I bowed quickly, turning so fast I nearly knocked over a side table, and rushed out of the chamber. Only when I stepped into the hallway and the door shut behind me did I finally exhale. My knees were weak. My hands were damp with sweat. And my face burned with a dozen kinds of humiliation. The 17th floor. How was I supposed to do this? If I went there, there'd be others. Vampires. Humans. Male servants. Bathing together. Talking. Laughing. And eventually noticing. Noticing that I wasn't who I claimed to be. That I wasn't a boy. I couldn't let that happen. If anyone found out, they'd kill me. Or worse. I pressed the elevator button with a shaking finger, chewing the inside of my cheek until I tasted copper. Think. Aries. Think. I needed to stay clean. Yes. I needed to pretend I'd followed his order. But I couldn't go to that shared shower. Maybe I could sneak into one of the unused rooms. Or find a servantess closet with a private sink. Or even use the water buckets near the laundry holes. Something. Anything. But I had to be fast. I had to be smart. Because if Emmerich found out, I disobeyed again. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime. I stepped inside, holding my breath. 45 floors. And none of them felt safe. But I had to survive. Somehow. The elevator hummed quietly as it descended toward the 17th floor. I stood stiffly, my back pressed to the cold wall, heart pounding in my ears. I had no choice. If I didn't go, Emmerich would know. And if he knew I disobeyed, if he even suspected I was lying again, I didn't want to imagine the consequences. The doors opened with a soft chime. I stepped out into a plain hallway lit by flickering lanterns. Everything smelled faintly of iron, stone, and damp air. At the far end was a wide, open archway carved with the sigil of House Valtros, a snarling beast with wings. Beneath it was a rusted sign. Servants' bathing quarters male. I swallowed hard. There were voices inside. Laughter. Water splashing. Footsteps. My entire body tensed. I took a breath. Act normal. I pushed the door open slowly. The bathing chamber was massive, lined with stone pillars and mist curling around the floor. On one side, there were rows of wooden lockers and towel hooks. On the other, steam rose from sunken pools and narrow showers carved directly into the wall. The warm haze made it hard to see, but I could still make out at least half a dozen shirtless men, some already in the water, some walking around half naked, towels slung low on their waists. My face flamed. I immediately turned my head to the side, pretending to scan the lockers. Don't look. Just don't look at anyone. A few glanced in my direction as I walked in, but no one said anything. They probably assumed I was just another skinny, new servant. I found an empty corner near the end of the room, far from the others. My hands stayed clenched by my sides as I sat stiffly on a bench and stared at the floor. Minutes passed. I didn't move. I couldn't. I heard them talking, grumbling about chores, mocking nobles, laughing at someone's story. The sound of water pouring. Buckets being filled. Towels flapping. Skin slapping against wet tile. My chest ached from how tightly I was holding my breath. I kept waiting for someone to speak to me. To ask why I wasn't undressing. To stare too long. To notice something wrong. But no one did. Eventually, one by one, they finished. The voices quieted. Wet footsteps padded across the stone. Lockers creaked. Doors opened and shut. Until finally silence. I looked up. The steam still lingered in the air like a ghost, curling around the empty space. Every sound echoed, now drips of water, my own trembling breath. I was alone. Slowly, I stood up, my legs stiff from sitting so long. I walked carefully toward one of the farthest showers, heart still racing. My hands shook as I peeled off the uniform layer by layer, doing it as quickly and quietly as I could. The cold air hit my skin like a slap, but I didn't have time to shiver. I stepped into the nearest stone stall, pulling the curtain across, and turned on the water. Warmth spilled over me. It soothed the ache in my limbs, the sting of my bruised cheek, the weight of fear still coiled tight in my chest. I let the water pour over me, my arms wrapped tightly around myself. For a few moments, I let myself pretend it was normal. That I belonged. That I wasn't constantly moments away from being discovered. I scrubbed fast, efficiently, wincing at every noise outside the curtain. I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. My reflection looked pale, tense, like a stranger. My eyes ringed with exhaustion and fear stared back at me. I couldn't keep this up forever. But for now I survived. Steam still clung to the air as I stepped out of the shower stall, towel wrapped tightly around me. My heart hadn't stopped racing since I arrived. I spotted a folded uniform on the corner bench. Crisp. Clean. Probably replaced by one of the palace attendants while I was waiting. It looked just like the one I was wearing earlier, dark grey tunic, tailored pants, and a fitted vest stitched with a royal crest. But this one was untouched. I hesitated only a moment before grabbing it. I glanced around once more to be sure no one had returned. Then, quickly, I untied the towel. My chest tightened. Don't look at it. Don't think about it. Just hide it like always. I turned my back to the mirror. Reaching down into my old uniform bundle, I pulled out the linen wraps I used daily. I wound the fabric tightly across my chest, flattening everything as much as I could. Every parse pressed harder against my ribs, restricting my breathing slightly, but that was the point. I had to erase every trace of the girl I used to be. A final knot rested below my arm, tucked neatly. When I glanced sideways in the mirror again, I saw what I needed. No curve, no softness. Just angles and shadows. I pulled the shirt on next. The fabric was stiff and cool, clinging slightly to the water left on my skin. I smoothed it over my chest, tugging the front until the wrinkles helped mask the shape beneath. Then came the trousers slightly loose, which helped, and the vest. I buttoned it slowly, carefully, ensuring it laid flat. I examined myself one last time. I didn't look like a girl. I didn't look like me. Just Aries. A lowly male servant. Nothing more. But it was still a lie I had to breathe in every day, every second. Tugging the collar up higher to hide the bruising at my jaw, I took one more steadying breath and turned toward the door. I stepped out of the bathing quarters quietly, heading back toward the elevator. And prayed no one else ever came in early. Aries' POV. What took you so long? Prince Emrich's voice cut through the room the moment I stepped inside, sharp as ever. I froze, the newly dried hem of my trousers still damp from the bath. There were many people already, Your Highness. Excuses, he snapped, waving his hand with irritation. Every time, it's the same. You're really useless. Go and make me tea, he ordered, already walking away toward his office. I turned quickly, eager to obey, only to freeze again when his voice called out behind me. Where are you going now? I stopped mid-step. To the Eastern kitchen? Are you dumb? He muttered, and I flinched. There's a kitchen here. In my chambers. Use that. Oh. Where exactly is it? I asked cautiously, my voice barely above a whisper. He sighed dramatically, like I was a complete waste of time. Do I have to do everything myself? I shrank back instinctively, but before I could respond, he was already moving. He crossed the distance between us in 2 quick strides and grabbed my wrist, not hard, but firm enough to make me jolt. Why is your wrist so thin? He muttered, more to himself than me. Do you not eat anything or what? I didn't he answer. Couldn't he? My throat felt tight. I simply let him pull me across the room, through a second doorway on the left side of the chamber. He stopped in front of a smaller, sleek kitchen space, elegant yet minimal. The countertops were marble black, the cabinets an obsidian gloss. Every surface gleamed under the crystal lights. There, he said shortly. This is where you make it. Try not to burn anything. He dropped my wrist and stepped back, arms folded, watching me like I might break the entire place just by breathing wrong. I nodded quickly and moved toward the counter, trying to calm my racing thoughts. The kettle was silver and automatic, clearly designed for vampires who had no patience for waiting. I filled it with water, located the black tea canister, and carefully measured the leaves. My hands still trembled faintly from the earlier panic. But I did my best to be precise. Behind me, I could feel his eyes. I tried to keep my movements fluid and steady, setting the teacup on a matching saucer. The sound of the boiling water filled the quiet, and I focused on it, used it to drown out the weight of his presence, the awareness prickling across my back. Why was he always so close? When the tea was ready, I placed the porcelain cup gently on the tray and turned to him. Your tea, Prince Emmerich, I said quietly, holding out the tray with both hands, careful not to let it tremble. He didn't take it right away. Instead, his gaze lingered on me, sharp, narrowed. Not with rage this time, but something more unreadable. Like he was picking me apart in his mind, dissecting me inch by inch. I tried not to shift under the weight of it. Finally, he reached out and took the cup. His fingers brushed against mine barely, and yet it sent a chill through me. He muttered as he brought the cup to his lips. That was it. No praise. No insult. Just a hum that could be meant anything. I held my breath, waiting for a reaction, but none came. He simply turned slightly, sipping slowly. At least he didn't spit it out or throw it in my face. I stepped back quietly, ready to fade into the background like always, when his voice cut through the silence again. Did you eat anything? The question startled me. I blinked. Not yet. His answer came instantly. Good. I stared at him, stunned. Good? What was good about that? My stomach had been twisting in knots all morning. I didn't dare ask. I kept my head low. He turned his back to me, walking toward the bedroom with the slow, confident steps that always echoed with authority. Follow me, he said without looking back. I hesitated for a split second before obeying. My legs moved on their own, quietly falling into step behind him. The long, rich drapes that separated the spaces of his chamber swayed slightly as he brushed past them. The scent of tea and something faintly smoky hung in the air. He didn't say anything as he placed the cup down on the ornate bedside table and walked to the far end of the room. I stood there by the doorway, uncertain. Why had he asked if I ate? Why did he say good? Was he testing something? Planning something? Or maybe he just didn't want a weak, slow servant collapsing on the floor. I swallowed hard and waited. I waited for his next words. His next order. His voice cut through the silence, low and direct. It's dinner time. And I'm to go outside. You're coming with me. But there are some rules you need to understand. I nodded immediately. Yes, Prince. He turned and gestured. Come inside. I followed him, stepping into the bedroom fully. The thick curtains muted the light, casting shadows along the walls, and the faint scent of spice and sandalwood clung to the air. Prince Emmerich stood tall near the armoire, arms crossed, watching me with the same unreadable expression. "Now," he said. "Let us start with something simple. You're not to speak unless spoken to. You do not make eye contact with anyone. And you stay beside me at all times. Got it?" "Yes, Prince," I replied quickly, keeping my eyes fixed on the floor. "Great. Now let us go." He turned sharply on his heel, long coat sweeping behind him as he strode toward the arched exit. I trailed behind him without a sound, keeping close but careful not to step too close. The grand hallway beyond his chambers was colder now, lit with golden sconces and lined with crimson banners bearing the royal crest. As we neared the elevator, his voice spoke again, calm, but laced with steel. "And one more thing." I looked up slightly. "Yes?" "Don't tell anyone you're Maverick's son." My stomach dropped. "Why?" He froze. Then slowly turned, his crimson eyes narrowed with sudden fury. "You do not question me. Got it?" He barked, the sharpness in his tone slicing through the air like a blade. I flinched, heart pounding. "I'm sorry." He stared at me for a long, tense beat before turning away without another word. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, and we both stepped inside. I stood rigid, the silence pressing against my chest like a weight. The ride down was mercifully short. When the grand doors swung open again, we stepped into an enormous hall, a towering space steeped in grandeur and icy discipline. Silver chandeliers glittered like stars frozen in time, casting pale light across the polished marble floor. The vast banquet tables stretched in long rows, each occupied by noble vampires draped in midnight-colored finery. Velvet coats, high collars, crimson-lined capes. Faces pale and cold, eyes unreadable. Behind every vampire stood a servant. A woman. Elegant, poised, and silent. Each one stood with her head bowed, hands folded neatly in front of her, like carved figurines placed behind masters. My throat tightened. Why are they all women? My gaze darted from one table to the next. Not a single male servant among them. Just me. The only a boy in a sea of women. But Prince Emmerich didn't seem fazed. He walked ahead, proud and silent, cutting through the tension like it didn't exist. And yet I felt it. The subtle glances of judgment. I gripped my fingers tighter behind my back, suddenly hyper-aware of every step, every breath. Did I look suspicious? Did they know? And then, "Prince Emmerich," voices called out in unison, snapping to sharp, rehearsed formality. The nobles rose as one, bowing low as he approached the head table. The moment he touched the high-backed chair, silence crushed the room like a command. I came to a halt behind him, lowering my gaze like the others, trying to match their posture. But questions swirled in my mind. Why was he the only one with a male servant? Why did he break the pattern? Did he always choose men? And if so, what would happen if he ever found out the truth about me? "Let us begin," Prince Emmerich announced, his voice cool and commanding. A bell chimed at his signal. Plates were uncovered, trays were brought in, and soft music began to play from an unseen quartet in the far corner of the room. As vampires began dining, sipping blood from delicate crystal flutes or eating rare meat delicacies, I remained still, trying not to breathe too loudly, trying to ignore the growing ache in my legs and the gnawing hunger in my stomach. No one spoke to me. No one even acknowledged I existed. Except him. Every now and then, I could feel his gaze flick toward me. Like he was checking. Watching. guarding, or testing. Whatever it was, I didn't know how long I could survive in this world. But I had no choice. I just had to endure. Aries' POV. As the vampires dined, servers began moving between tables, placing small bowls into each servantess' hands. One arrived in front of me, wordlessly offering the bowl. I took it. Inside were just two things: an apple and a few grapes. I stared. Are they serious? How was I supposed to be full with just this? My stomach, already hollow since morning, gave an impatient growl I quickly muffled with a cough. I felt eyes on me. Prince Emmerich. I looked up instinctively. His gaze met mine, sharp and unreadable, before flicking away again as he returned to his own elaborate meal. A steaming plate of meat, thick sauces, bread, wine. I lowered my eyes and looked at the other servants. None of them hesitated. They began eating quietly, remaining behind their masters like silent shadows. That was my cue. I bit into the apple, the sour skin scraping my tongue. Then I noticed something else. Each vampire had a glass beside their plate, filled with something red. A deep, glistening crimson. All except Emmerich. I blinked at the color. Wine? No, it smelled metallic. Sharp. Like rust and warmth. Is that blood? I looked away quickly, throat tightening. Then someone spoke, shattering the polished quiet of the hall. So, is this guy your new servant, Emmerich? The voice was casual, too casual. Confident. Almost amused. I looked across the table. A tall vampire with wavy, silver hair and a cocky smile leaned back in his seat. He didn't even glance at the prince with the deference everyone else did. He just called the prince by name. Wasn't he that punishable? Emmerich's eyes narrowed, but he answered anyway. Yes. The man looked at me now. Directly. What is your name? I glanced at Emmerich, unsure if I was even allowed to speak. He gave me the smallest nod. Aries, I said quietly. The man tilted his head. Aries here. Why do I feel like I've heard that name before? Murmurs rose from nearby nobles, and several turned to glance at me again, this time with faint curiosity, as if trying to place the name. Wyatt, shut up, Emmerich snapped coldly. The man Wyatt grinned and raised his hands in mock surrender. All right. Just asking. Who was this guy? How could he act so casually in front of Prince Emmerich? Were they friends? Then Wyatt turned back to me with a glimmer in his eye. Aries, would you mind serving me this drink? He gestured toward his empty glass. My gaze dropped to the jug on the table, filled with the red liquid. Blood. It had to be. I froze. Again, I looked to the prince, uncertain. Emmerich closed his eyes in visible irritation before letting out a slow breath. You have your own servant, don't you? Yeah, but she's sick. And I didn't want her coughing near me, Wyatt said with a shrug. I'm just asking for a small favor. Why so possessive? I'm not. I was just asking. Fine. Emmerich waved a hand without looking at me. Aries, serve him. I placed my half-eaten apple down and walked stiffly around the table. The jug was warm in my hand, and as I tilted it, the metallic scent hit me harder. My stomach turned. I tried not to wrinkle my nose as the blood filled Wyatt's glass. Thank you, Aries, he said smoothly. But then, the glass suddenly tilted. His hand slipped, and the entire drink spilled onto me. The cold splash soaked my front, clinging to my tunic and seeping into the cloth beneath. I flinched back. Did he do that on purpose? Wyatt gasped, all false innocence. Oh no. I didn't mean to. Ares. I'm so sorry. I couldn't speak. My fingers clenched. The blood was soaking through everything, including the wrappings I used to bind my chest. I turned toward Emmerich, desperate for some sort of instruction. He was already half risen from his seat. Then, just as quickly, he sat back down. It's fine, he said coldly. Why are you apologizing? He's just a servant. Ares, go and wash it off. The words sank deep. Just a servant. I swallowed the burn of humiliation and nodded silently. My throat was too tight to speak anyway. All eyes followed me as I stepped away. I could feel them. Every glance. The smirks. Even the pity. The elevator doors opened, and I stepped in alone. As they closed behind me, Emmerich and Wyatt resumed conversation like nothing had happened. Like I hadn't just been doused in blood in front of everyone. I pressed my back against the wall of the lift and shut my eyes. Don't cry. Don't cry. By the time I stepped into his chambers again, my clothes clung to my skin. The blood had dried in sticky patches across my chest and sides. But worse. The cloth I used to bind my breasts was soaked. Unraveling. No. No, no, no. I rushed into the bathroom, unsure if I was even allowed to use it. I didn't care. I locked the door and immediately began peeling off the tunic and the binding cloth. My skin stung, raw from the tight wrapping and now irritated from the blood. The air hit my lungs, and I gasped for breath, finally free. I didn't have time to relax. I grabbed a towel and tried to clean the spots where the blood had dried. If anyone saw. If Emmerich walked in. My heart thundered. The door. I heard it open. No. Please no. I moved quickly, tugging the cloth around my chest again, fingers trembling. I slipped the tunic halfway on and doused the front with water, trying to make it look like I'd just rinsed it off. I tried to breathe. To calm down and wipe the sweat from my forehead with the back of my hand. I stood in the bathroom, heart still pounding in my chest, the wet tunic clinging to my skin like a second layer of nerves. The sweat and panic hadn't quite left me. Every tick of silence outside the door felt like a countdown, like the prince might walk in at any second and catch me like this. Exposed. Caught in a lie I couldn't survive. Then, a voice. Ares. I jolted. A male voice, low, calm, unfamiliar. My throat tightened. I swallowed and forced out a weak, why yes? The prince told me to give you a new uniform. It's outside the door. I froze. Then let out the breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Not Emmerich. Not danger. Just a servant. Probably one of the palace aides. A thank you, I called out, trying to steady my voice. I heard soft footsteps retreating down the hallway. Still, I waited. A full minute. Then another. Only when I was certain I was alone again did I slowly open the bathroom door and peek outside. There it was. A neatly folded set of fresh clothes laid on the polished floor, dark, clean, and identical to what I had worn earlier. The fabric still held the faint scent of lavender soap and something stronger. Lycaon. I grabbed it quickly and shut the door again, locking it behind me. I changed into the clean tunic and trousers, binding myself with a fresh strip of cloth I kept hidden in the lining of my boots. It was tight. Tighter than before. It had to be. I couldn't risk any slips. Not after what had just happened. I wiped my skin once more, making sure there were no traces of blood, no red smudges that might raise suspicion. Then, as I pulled the tunic over my head and began adjusting the collar, a new thought struck me. Wait. How did he know I was in this room's bathroom? Not in the men's servant quarters. Not on the 17th floor where I was supposed to go. And yet, he'd known exactly where to bring the clothes. My hand paused over the buttons of the tunic. Did Emmerich tell them? Did he know I'd come here, instead of the servant floor? Why would he assume that? Unless he expected me not to go back there. Because I wasn't like the others. Because I wasn't who they thought I was. My pulse quickened again. I looked into the mirror. My reflection stared back, flat chest, short hair, the stiff posture I forced myself into. I'd spent years perfecting the act. But Emmerich, he noticed things. Always noticed things. Thin wrists. Low voice. The way I hesitated before walking into the men's shower. Had he already begun to suspect? Or was he just used to his servants bending the rules? Either way, the thought unsettled me. I adjusted my tunic again, smoothed out the creases, and forced my face into something neutral. Calm. Collected. Like nothing had happened. Then I stepped out of the bathroom, and back into the princess chambers, unsure if I was walking towards safety or deeper into the fire. Aries' POV. I sat on the cold marble floor, my back pressed against the wall, knees pulled to my chest. The silence of the princess chamber was thick and eerie, broken only by the occasional howl of wind brushing past the high-arched windows. Midnight had long passed, yet he hadn't returned. And still I dreaded his arrival. What if he knows? What if he has found out what I've been hiding so desperately? He'd made one thing painfully clear: he hates liars. And me? I've been lying since the moment I stepped foot in this place. My chest rose and fell in shallow breaths as my mind raced through every encounter, every slip, every close call. I lowered my head, resting it against the wall behind me, letting my heavy lids fall shut. Just a minute of rest. Just a little silence before. Bang! The door slammed open with a thunderous crash, splintering the stillness. I jolted upright, heart hammering against my ribs as my eyes flew open. Prince Emmerich stood in the doorway. His figure cast a long, shadowed silhouette under the faint lantern light behind him, and his presence sucked the air from the room. His coat was undone, his hair slightly disheveled, and his eyes, those eyes were burning. Literally burning. A flicker of ember. A pulse of blood red. Back and forth. And every ounce of that fury was trained on me. I scrambled to my feet, my legs trembling like they might give out beneath me. My hands fisted the fabric of my tunic, the faint stain from the spilled blood still damp on my side, sticking to my skin. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. With one slow motion, he raised a single hand. The heavy door slammed shut behind him without a touch. Magic. Not the subtle kind. The raw, unnerving kind that prickled across my skin like static. I took an instinctive step back, but he kept moving forward. Measured. Unyielding. Like a predator cornering its prey. And I knew. He knows. He knows. Every nerve in my body screamed run, speak, move, do anything, but I couldn't. My limbs were useless. I stood there, trembling, like a puppet whose strings had been cut, unable to flee even as danger pressed closer. Prince Emmerich stopped just a breath away, not too close, but close enough that I could feel the burn of his anger seeping from his skin like heat off flame. For a moment, I almost believed he'd keep that distance. But then, with a flick of 2 fingers sharp, effortless, terrifying, my body lurched forward. A force, unseen but suffocating, pulled me to him in one cruel motion. Before I could even regain my balance, his hand clamped tightly around my throat. I choked, my eyes widening in shock. The pressure wasn't unbearable, but it was enough to steal the air from my lungs and send my heart into a terrified frenzy. I clawed weakly at his arm, my feet struggling to stay grounded beneath me, but it was useless. He didn't flinch. He didn't blink. His expression was unreadable, part fury, part focus, like he was battling something inside himself. And then, he leaned in. Too close. His face dipped toward the curve of my neck, his breath brushing hot against my skin. And then, from the shadows of his parted lips, fangs. Sharp. Glinting. Hungering. Oh. Please, Prince Emmerich, forgive me. I screamed, my voice cracking, torn from the depths of my throat. It was raw panic. No pride, no restraint. Just desperation. And just like that, he stopped. In an instant, the pressure vanished. He shoved me back, not roughly, but urgently, as if my voice had jolted him out of something dark. I stumbled, nearly falling, my hand flying to my throat. My breath came in shaky bursts, my fingers trembling. He stared at me. His fangs had vanished. His gaze, once glowing crimson, had darkened back to their usual deep obsidian cold, unreadable. But now there was something else in his eyes. Not rage. Not hunger. Confusion. As if he didn't quite understand what had just happened either. Neither of us spoke. The silence between us was loud, ringing with the aftermath of what almost happened. Then, without a word, without a glance, he turned away. His footsteps were silent as he strode across the chamber and slipped behind the heavy curtain that led to his office. The carved wooden frame swallowed his shadow, and the soft sweep of the curtain falling shut was the only sound that remained. I stood there, chest heaving, hand pressed to the place where his grip had been just moments ago. Still feeling it. Still shaking. Still alive. But something had shifted. Between him. Between me. Inside him. And I didn't know if that was a good thing. Or something much, much worse. And if that worse meant he knew my truth, knew I wasn't who he thought I was, then I wasn't safe here. Not in this palace. Not anywhere near him. I could be killed at any moment. Or worse, tortured for lying. I had to leave. Run. Disappear. Far from here, far from him, somewhere no one could recognize me. No one would question who I was pretending to be. But then, Ares. The sharpness of his voice cracked through the heavy silence, snapping my spine straight. His tone came from behind the curtain, his office. I froze. Ares, he called again, louder. My legs didn't want to move. But my mind screamed, you have to. If I didn't obey, it could get worse. I swallowed the knot of dread in my throat and stepped slowly toward the arched door. The curtain brushed softly against my shoulder as I entered his office. He was behind his desk, seated in a high-backed chair, papers spread across the dark wood. His fingers held a pen, but he wasn't writing, he was watching me. Eyes darker than ever, unreadable. Come here. His voice was calm. Too calm. And that only made it worse. I hesitated before walking forward, each step measured, unsure if I was walking into safety or a trap. Then, without any warning, he said, "Eat." My gaze dropped to the desk. In front of him, no, in front of me now was a simple plate, 2 crisp slices of bacon and a few red apple wedges. Still fresh. Steam rising. What? I blinked at the plate, then at him, confused. Why was he offering me food? Was this a game? Was he planning to kill me after I ate? Was he fattening me up for slaughter like prey? Or was it something else? Maybe he didn't know the truth after all. But then how did he know I was in his bathroom earlier? Not in the servants' bathing floor? That wasn't a guess. That was certainty. My throat tightened. "I don't want to repeat myself again," he said flatly, his voice like a blade sheathed in silk. I jumped slightly, then nodded and reached for the plate. But the moment my fingers grazed the edge, he stood up. I flinched hard. The instinct was stronger than me, I couldn't help it. I flinched away, expecting a blow, a grab, fangs again, anything. But none came. He sighed long, tired. "I'm not going to hurt you," he muttered. "Just sit here and eat." I stared blankly at the large chair he'd just risen from his chair. My heart skipped. Wait, was he serious? "Sit already," he said, more impatient this time. And before I could respond, he reached forward, grabbed me lightly by the arm, not rough, but firm, and nudged me down into the seat. And just like that, I was sitting where the prince had Saturday. At his desk. With his food. Like I belonged. He didn't wait to see my reaction. Instead, he turned away with that same unreadable expression and said, "I'm going to bathe. Make sure you finish the food." And then he disappeared behind the curtain leading to his private quarters, his footsteps silent as shadows. I didn't move. I couldn't. My fingers clutched the edge of the desk, my heart thundering in my chest. What the hell just happened? He nearly bit me an hour ago. Choked me. Lifted me like I weighed nothing. And now he was feeding me. Making me sit in his chair. Speaking gently, almost gently. Was he playing some twisted game? Was he mad? Or was there something inside him breaking? Maybe he wasn't just dangerous. Whatever it was, I didn't feel relief. I felt unsettled. Because monsters didn't scare me as much as monsters who were kind sometimes. Those were the ones who hurt you the worst. Aries SPOV. I couldn't eat. Not a single bite. The plate sat in front of me, perfectly arranged warm bacon, sliced apples, but my stomach twisted tighter with every passing second. The air was too heavy. The silence pressed against my ears like iron. Every breath felt like a mistake I was about to pay for. But he had told me to eat. And when Prince Emmerich told you to do something, you do it. So, I chewed. Slowly. Mechanically. Each bite tasted like ash, each swallow heavier than the last. Minutes passed, or maybe longer, I couldn't tell. Then I heard it. The soft creak of the chamber door opening. I looked up, expecting the usual sharp-eyed, cloak-clad prince. Instead, my breath caught. He stepped inside wearing nothing but low-slung black trousers. His chest was bare, chiseled and pale like carved stone. Muscles tense, scars laced across his ribs and shoulder like old war paint. Shadows clung to his skin, and the torchlight flickered across him like fire, trying to decide whether to worship or flee. I dropped my gaze, heat flooding my face. He say a word. Just walked across the room, quiet as smoke. "You're still not finished?" His voice was calm. Too calm. "I'm done," I whispered, nudging the plate forward like an offering. He sit in his throne. He sat across from me in a plain wooden chair. It threw me off. Completely. Why was I still sitting in his seat? Why was he there, across from me, instead of above me? I didn't know what made me speak. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was confusion clawing at my throat. "Why are you doing this?" The question barely left my lips. A whisper. But he heard. His gaze snapped up, eyes burning gold, no, ember. Flickering like something ancient and dangerous beneath the surface. "What am I doing?" he repeated, tone unreadable. I hesitated, then fumbled out, "I just meant thank you. For the food." And when my clothes were ruined, someone brought me a clean uniform, so I thought. "I didn't send you clothes," he interrupted, his voice sharp. I blinked. "But the uniform, this one." "That wasn't me," he said, flatly. "I fed you because Wyatt denied you food. That's all. Don't confuse obligation with compassion. I'm not kind." A chill swept through me. "But you let me go." "That night. In the forest," I said slowly, cautiously. "You could killed me. And when Matteo hurt me, you." He stood abruptly. My words died in my throat. His eyes were crimson now. Not glowing, gently burning. In less than a blink, he was in front of me. Caging me between his arms, leaning close enough that I could see the red veins threading through his irises. His voice was low. Dark. Dangerous. "I let you go because you're a kid. A source. Do you know what your blood is to us? Sweet. Rare. Clean. And you," he inhaled near my neck, and I froze. "You smell like a fucking feast." I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. I was angry at Matteo because he disrespected my authority. Not because I care about you. I would done the same if he attacked a broom. My chest squeezed. I felt small. Pathetic. His voice turned cruel. "You think a plate of food means I'm good? I've slaughtered entire towns. Burned cities to ash and made kings kneel in blood." The weight of his words crushed me. "You're really a psycho." Before I could finish, his hand struck me. The sound of the slap echoed, sharp and vicious. Pain exploded across my cheek, and my vision blurred. I clutched my face, gasping. "Don't test me," he snarled. "You don't know the first thing about me." He straightened, jaw tight. "I've tolerated you long enough." And then calm. Too calm. "Stand up." Trembling, I obeyed. My knees were jelly, my face burning. My vision swam. He grabbed my wrist. Cold. Harsh. We walked. Or rather, he walked. I was dragged behind him, my legs stumbling to keep up. When the elevator doors closed, I was trapped alone with the sound of my heartbeat pounding in my ears. He didn't speak. Didn't glance at me. And when the doors opened, the corridor was full. Guards. Vampires. Servants. They all saw. Not one of them intervened. He marched me through them like I was already condemned. And they watched silent, complicit. He led me deeper into the castle. Past the glow of torches. Into stone halls that smelled of damp and mold and rot. And then he stopped. The door before us was monstrous iron, rusted, bolted like it held back monsters. He didn't even touch it. Just flicked his hand. The bolts groaned. The door creaked open. A wave of cold, wet air spilled out like breath from a tomb. Go in. I hesitated. So he shoved me. I fell. The stone floor bit into my knees. I caught myself with my hands and hissed as I scraped my palms. The darkness was suffocating. I turned, eyes wide. Please. His face was a mask. This is your place now. The door slammed. Bang! I scrambled to it, slamming my fists. Let me out. Emmerich. Please, I didn't mean it. Silence. I slowly turned. And the dark swallowed me whole. There was no light. No flame. No torch. Only a narrow slit of a window high above, moonlight barely cutting through the black. And then... skitter. I jerked. Something moved near the walls. Skitter. Skitter. The sound of tiny claws. Nails tapping on stone. My breath quickened. Rats. I backed into a wall, curling into myself. The air was foul rank with mildew and something worse. Something that smelled like old blood and rotten silence that had never been broken. I don't know how long I stayed like that. I don't know how long I would stay. But I did know this. There were no rules down here. No kindness. No prince. No light. Just me. And the darkness. And the things that crawled. It was morning. Or something close to it. A pale shaft of sunlight slanted through the narrow, high window above, casting a dim rectangle of gold on the far wall. Dust motes floated lazily in the beam, like forgotten memories suspended in air. But the rest of the dungeon remained cloaked in cold shadows, the kind that stuck to your skin and made it hard to breathe. I hadn't moved much. My back was still pressed against the damp stone wall. My knees drawn to my chest, arms wrapped around them in a feeble attempt to feel small enough to disappear. The cold had numbed my toes. My fingers tingled. My face still stung where he struck me. But worse than the cold were the rats. They skittered in and out of cracks along the walls, their tiny claws scraping against the stone. I could hear them now, even in daylight, busy, frantic, bold. Sometimes they darted across the floor too close. I didn't scream, just flinched violently, biting my lip hard enough to taste iron. There was no comfort here. No sleep. Only shivering silence and dread. Then, clang! The dungeon door creaked open with a metallic groan. I lifted my head, heart jumping into my throat. A guard stood at the entrance, half shadowed by the light behind him. He didn't look at me. Didn't speak. He just shoved something or someone forward. A body hit the stone floor with a dull thud, followed by a muffled grunt of pain. The figure crumpled into a heap just a few feet from where I sat. Then the door slammed shut again. Bang! Darkness swallowed the room once more. I blinked, slowly pushing myself upright, my muscles stiff and trembling. The figure on the ground groaned and rolled onto his side. A man. He looked young, barely older than me. His shirt was torn, one arm wrapped around his ribs. Blood dripped from a wound on his upper arm, staining the fabric a deep, wet crimson. His breathing was uneven, strained. I froze as his head turned. And then his eyes found mine. They were dark and alert, even through the pain sharp with something fierce. Not cruelty. Not fear. But defiance. He stared at me for a long second, and I stared back, my own gaze wary, guarded. Was he a prisoner? Or bait? I inched back against the wall, every nerve on edge. He blinked a few times, as if registering that I was real. And then, with effort, he pushed himself up to sit, cradling his wounded arm, his expression tightening with pain. Neither of us spoke. The silence between us was heavy and uncertain until he broke it. His voice was low, hoarse, but steady. Do you want to get out of here? I stared. He coughed, wincing, then looked me straight in the eye. I'm serious, he said. Do you want to run away with me? My breath caught. Run? The word hit me like a splash of ice water. Was this a trick? A test? Had Emmerich sent him? But his eyes, there was something raw in them. Real. Not cold and cruel like the others. He looked desperate. Not for his own life. For a chance. Any chance. And maybe for someone to take it with him. I didn't answer right away. Because part of me still remembered the slap. The rats. The blood. And the way this place could crush you in silence. But another part, the part still burning with defiance beneath the fear, leaned forward, heart pounding. Who are you? I whispered. He smiled faintly, bitterly. Harrison. Someone who has been down here too long. Then he looked at the high window, and back at me. I have a plan. I've been waiting for the right time. They think I'm broken. That I want to try again. He paused, eyes intense. I'm going to try anyway. With or without you. He started to push himself up, swaying slightly. You want to rot in this place? Stay. Then he extended his good hand toward me. But if you want to live. His voice dropped to a whisper. Come with me. Author's POV. Someone help. Aries' scream tore through the silence of the dungeon like a blade. Her voice cracked, raw with panic. Her body hit the cold, grimy floor, the impact jarring her spine. Harrison's hands were tight around her throat, his weight pressing down, suffocating her. Her legs kicked frantically, boots scraping against stone, her fingers clawing at his arms in desperation. Please, she gasped, her voice barely a whisper. Let go. Harrison didn't stop. His grip remained firm. From the outside, it looked terrifyingly real. The heavy iron door slammed open. A guard rushed in, eyes widening in horror as he took in the scene two prisoners, one choking the other, madness in the air. What the hell are you doing? The guard shouted, charging toward them. Let go of him. Now. He grabbed Harrison by the shoulders, trying to haul him off. Harrison grunted in resistance, just enough to make it convincing. Aries coughed violently, turning her head slightly. Her hands trembled as they moved. Just a little more. With the guard focused entirely on Harrison, Aries' shaky fingers slipped down toward his belt. Her chest was tight with terror. Her pulse pounded in her ears. Please don't feel it. Her fingers found the holster. It was stiff leather, heavy. Her hand trembled as she pulled. The weight of the gun nearly slipped from her grip, but she held on. Click! She sat up, her breath shallow. Legs trembling. Her arms shook as she raised the weapon, both hands clenched tight around it. The barrel pointed directly at the back of the guard's head. Don't move, she shouted, her voice still cracked and shaking but loud enough. The guard froze. He turned slowly, cautiously. What he saw wasn't just the frightened boy from earlier. There was something sharper in Ari's wide eyes now. Still afraid, yes, but no longer helpless. That S when it hit him. This wasn't a brawl. This was a setup. A plan. Harrison shoved him to the ground in one swift move, pinning him down with a knee between his shoulder blades. The man grunted, his face hitting the cold stone. Harrison looked up at Ares and gave her a crooked smirk. Nice work, he said, breathing hard. Ares didn't respond. She was still frozen, the gun trembling in her hands. Her entire body shook from adrenaline and fear, but she didn't lower it. She couldn't. This was it. No turning back now. If you try to scream or anything, Harrison said, pressing his knee deeper into the guard's spine, you know what we'll do, right? The guard nodded quickly, face twisted in fear. We don't want to kill you, Harrison said smoothly. But we will. All we need is some help. So be a good dog and answer the question. Harrison leaned closer. How do we get out of this dungeon without anyone noticing? There's a back door, the guard muttered, voice muffled by the floor. It leads outside, but it's locked. Where's the key? Harrison snapped. I don't know. You don't? Harrison said coldly, reaching for the gun in Ares' hands. Ares, pull the trigger. Ares' breath caught in her throat. But... No. Please, the guard screamed, panic rising in his voice. Okay. It's in my left pocket. Please don't shoot. Harrison snorted. Good answer. He reached into the pocket and pulled out a ring of old, rusted keys. Now, Harrison said calmly, are there any guards past that back door? No. No one goes there, it leads to the forbidden forest. No guards posted there. Perfect, Harrison said. Then, without warning, he snatched the gun from Ares' hands and slammed the butt of it into the guard's head. Crack! The man collapsed with a grunt, unconscious. Ares flinched, eyes wide. Why did you? Course I don't trust him to stay quiet, Harrison said, wiping the sweat off his brow. Good night, bastard. He shoved the guard onto his back and pocketed the keys. Then he looked at Ares, who was still trembling, still staring at the unconscious man in shock. Let us go. We don't have time. But her voice wavered, guilt twisting in her gut. I thought we weren't gonna hurt anyone. Harrison's jaw tightened. And I thought you wanted to escape. Do you, or not? Because if you're having second thoughts, I'll go alone. Ares' lips parted, heart thundering in her chest. She was scared. Terrified. Her whole body screamed to run back to the cell and hide under the cot. But she nodded. I'm coming. Together, they bolted out of the cell, keys in hand. The dungeon halls stretched out before them dark, cold, lined with shadowy cells. At the very end, just beyond the reach of flickering torches, was the old iron door. Their way out. Ares clenched her fists tighter, her knuckles white from the strain. One step at a time, she reminded herself. just one step at a time. She and Harrison exchanged a glance brief, urgent before he turned the key in the ancient lock. It gave a loud metallic click that echoed ominously through the dungeon corridor. The door groaned as it opened outward, iron hinges creaking in protest. And the moment it opened, a sharp gust of wind rushed in, colder than anything they felt inside. It hit them like a slap, dry and biting, thick with the scent of damp earth and something metallic, something old. Both of them instinctively raised an arm to shield their eyes. Ares staggered back a step. The air out here was different, not just colder, but heavier, as though it carried centuries of silence and secrets. Slowly, she lowered her arm and blinked. The forbidden forest stretched endlessly before them. But it wasn't green and alive. It was dark wrong. The trees were tall, twisted things with branches like skeletal fingers stretching toward the sky. No leaves rustled. No birds chirped. The ground was carpeted with black moss, and the path looked half swallowed by fog. And the sky. It was black. Not the deep blue of early dawn or the fading hues of night, but pitch black, like a sheet of soot. And there was no sun. Not even a trace of light behind the clouds. Just darkness, unnatural and unmoving. Ares' breath hitched. Her heart pounded so hard it hurt. Harrison, she whispered, barely able to speak through the chill in her throat. He didn't respond immediately. His eyes were locked upward. The high window in our cell had sunlight coming in, right? He finally asked, his voice low. Ares nodded slowly, uneasily. Why, yeah, it was morning. There was definitely light. Then why? He narrowed his eyes. Why does it look like night here? The silence between them was deafening. She knew this place. The last time she stepped into these woods, she'd been alone. Desperate. Wrapped in a stolen cloak and trembling with fear, chasing a rumor that could save her life. A flower that bloomed once a year, hidden deep in the forest, glowing with magic capable of granting a wish. She hadn't found it. Instead, she'd found him. Her throat tightened at the memory. That voice like smoke, those eyes like fire buried beneath obsidian. The way he'd appeared out of nowhere, how the forest had circled her like a snare. She should never come back. Goosebumps rose along Ares' arms. What's wrong? Harrison asked, noticing the change in her posture. This isn't normal, she muttered. I don't think it's safe. Something's wrong here, Harrison. What if we're walking into something worse? He glanced back at her, jaw tense. And staying back is safer? She faltered. Look, he continued, his tone firm but not harsh, we can't turn back now. Both parts are dangerous, yeah, but only one has a chance at freedom. He stepped forward, toward the trees. If vampires exist, he muttered, more to himself, then a cursed forest isn't that hard to believe either. Ares swallowed hard as Harrison moved forward without hesitation, but she lingered at the threshold, her eyes scanning the trees. She remembered how the forest had trapped her in circles. How the shadows had closed in. How he had leaned in and whispered, go home, little boy, before I decide to keep you here. But now there was no turning back. This time, she wasn't here for a flower. She was running for her life. It wasn't courage that pushed her forward, it was desperation. Her legs moved before her mind could catch up. She followed him, even as every instinct screamed to her to stop. The moment she stepped over the threshold, past the iron gate and into the forest, the wind shifted. The air grew colder still, and the fog around their ankles thickened like a living thing curling up their legs. Ares wrapped her arms around herself, shivering. Something is watching us, she thought. I can feel it. But she didn't say it aloud. Because Harrison was walking ahead with unshaken steps, and if she spoke her fears, she wasn't sure she could keep going. So she said nothing. Just kept walking, one foot in front of the other. Into the darkness. Into the unknown. Author's POV. What is this place? Why does everything feel so wrong? Harrison muttered, his voice strained beneath forced calm. His eyes swept the dense trees, every one of them gnarled and twisted the same way, clawing up toward a sky that barely existed. Moss and roots coiled like serpents beneath their boots, and each step sounded too loud, too hollow. The forest was dead silent. No birds. No insects. No rustling in the underbrush. Just the crunch of brittle leaves and their own anxious breathing. Harrison Aries murmured, her voice tight. He turned, brow raised. What now? She didn't answer immediately. Her gaze kept sweeping the clearing, her heartbeat loud in her ears, a warning drum. We're going in circles, as she said finally. He frowned. What? Aries stepped toward a crooked, towering tree just ahead. Her fingers brushed its bark rough and cold. A long scar ran down the trunk like a claw mark. She crouched down. A broken branch. A patch of flattened silver grass. She had seen this exact scene before. I know this spot, as she whispered. I saw it last time I came through here. Harrison blinked. You've been here? There's no time to explain. What matters is this forest doesn't move normally. It twists. Loops. You think you're walking forward, but the forest rearranges around you. It pulls you back. She turned slowly, eyes scanning the identical trees. We haven't gone anywhere. Harrison shifted uncomfortably now, studying the woods with fresh unease. Okay, maybe it just feels familiar. But we haven't walked that way yet. He strode past the marked tree, vanishing behind it for a moment, then re-emerged in the same clearing. Same stump. Same trees. Same everything. What the hell? He breathed. Aries moved beside him, her chest tightening. She knew this. The forest had done this to her once before. It was happening again. I told you, she whispered. This place is cursed. It doesn't want us to leave. Then wind. Sharp. Sudden. It cut through the trees like a breath at her neck. Both of them spun around. Nothing. Just the shadows. Watching. And yet, Aries felt it something out there. Not human. Not even alive in the way she understood. Waiting. Harrison exhaled hard. Okay. We'll figure it out. We need to mark where we've been. Scratch trees, break branches, whatever works. Something to leave a trail. But Aries didn't move. She stood still, eyes slowly rising toward the canopy. There was no sky. No stars. No clouds. Just an endless void pressing down from above as if the forest had swallowed the heavens. The silence grew heavy, humming louder than sound. And then, like smoke rising from old memories, a voice whispered in the back of her mind. Before I decide to keep you here. Her blood turned to ice. Aries, let us go. Harrison barked, glancing back. Then, he stopped. His body jerked. And froze. Harrison? Her voice cracked. He was standing mid-motion, one hand half lifted, his head cocked unnaturally to one side. His eyes were wide, but wrong. Pupils blown out, almost devoured. His chest rose in a shallow, trembling breath, and blood began to pour from his eyes. Thick, slow tears of red trailed down his face. His mouth opened, but no sound came, just a choking rasp, as though something unseen had wrapped cold fingers around his throat. Harrison! Ares stepped toward him, panic overtaking her. Harrison, what is happening? He move. Then his limbs began to tremble. Not like pain. Like something was pulling strings. He dropped to his knees, slowly, stiffly. Blood now leaked from his nose. His ears. His eyes never blinked. Still staring. Still bleeding. No, Ares gasped, falling beside him. She cupped his face with trembling hands. Hey, stay with me. Please. His lips twitched. A breath escaped. One word. Run. And then, his eyes rolled back, white and empty, and his body slumped forward into her arms. Cold. Limp. Gone. Her scream tore through the trees like a blade, raw and broken, but no one answered. Only the wind did, curling through the branches like 100 voices whispering secrets she didn't want to hear. Ares staggered to her feet and bolted. Branches whipped at her face. Her lungs burned with every breath. Her heart thundered in her chest, threatening to shatter her ribs. She didn't care where she was going anymore, just away. Away from that corpse. Away from whatever had done that to him. Her foot caught a jagged rock. She fell hard, her hands scraping the earth, her ankle twisting sharply beneath her. Pain shot up her leg. She bit back a cry. Blood stained the torn edge of her pants. She forced herself up, blinking through the sting of tears. Her ankle throbbed violently, her hands scraped raw, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. Not here. Not after what she'd just seen. Then, a voice. Low. Cold. Familiar. Running again? She froze. Her entire body went rigid. No. No, it couldn't be. Slowly, like her limbs were no longer hers, Ares turned her head. And saw him. Standing between the trees like a ghost pulled straight from her nightmares. Prince Emmerich. The hybrid. His tall frame was cloaked in shadow, half his face hidden by the swaying branches. But his eyes, those glowing silver eyes, burned through the dark like twin blades. He wasn't supposed to be here. Her mouth parted, her throat dry. Prince Emmerich, she stammered, her voice barely more than a whisper. Tears welled up in her eyes, not just from pain, but from the shock. The fear. He stepped forward slowly, boots silent against the moss. And then, without a word, he sank to one knee before her. His gaze locked onto hers, calm, sharp, utterly unreadable. I must say, Ares, he said, voice dangerously low, you've got some nerve. You really thought no one would know? That no one would notice you escaped? His smile didn't reach his eyes. That you crept into the forbidden forest and actually believed it wouldn't scream your name? I'm sorry, she choked out, flinching. But before she could say more, his hand snapped forward and grabbed a fistful of her hair from behind, yanking her head back. A cry of pain escaped her lips. No, he said coldly. Don't talk. Not now. You listen. His voice was ice. Controlled. Cruel. I was calm. I let you live. Do you know why? His face inched closer. She could see every sharp angle of it, carved like stone. Because you're Maverick's son. Ari's heart slammed against her chest. Not son but daughter, but he didn't know that. Not yet. I tolerated your presence, he continued, tightening his grip, even when you were insolent. Even when you looked at me like I was something less than you. His breath was a whisper against her ear. But you broke the rules. You defied me. He threw her to the ground, not violently but enough to make her stumble and wince. He stood now, towering over her, voice calm but laced with venom. This forest, he said, lifting his hand slightly, breathes through me. It listens to me. A single leaf falls and I know. And you thought I wouldn't sense you? She looked up at him, shaking, dirt smeared across her cheek. Her ankle throbbed, her entire body trembling with exhaustion and fear. Harrison's face flashed in her mind, those bleeding eyes, that last word. Run. And now Emmerich continued softly, almost thoughtfully, I have to decide how to punish you. He tilted his head, lips curling in a small, cruel smile. Because death, no, that would be mercy. And I don't give mercy to liars who betray me. He took a step closer, the air tightening. I could leave you here. Let the forest eat you slowly. Let it pull your bones into its roots and drink your blood like rain. Another step. Or maybe I'll break you from the inside. Peel away that arrogance. Strip away that will. Make you beg to return to the dungeon. He crouched again, this time so close she could feel the chill rolling off him. You don't get to decide how your story ends, he whispered. I do. Aries' POV. So, he said, voice low and steady, I have the perfect punishment for you. Something inside me snapped. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was the raw instinct to survive. But I didn't wait to hear another word. I pushed myself up, ignoring the scream of pain from my ankle, and took off into the trees. The forest blurred around me as I ran, branches tearing at my arms and clothes. Each step was agony, the gash in my ankle flaring with white-hot pain, but I forced my legs to keep moving. I didn't have a plan, didn't know where I was going, only that I had to get away from him. From his voice. From his eyes. From whatever punishment he had whispered about. Leaves crunched beneath my feet, and the uneven ground made every stride feel like a gamble. My breath was ragged, too loud in the night air, and the cold wind bit into my skin as I stumbled forward, faster and faster. For a moment, I dared to believe I could outrun him. But deep down, I knew I couldn't. He was a hybrid stronger than a vampire, sharper than any witches. If he wanted to catch me, he would. And he did. I heard at first the faint sound of movement to my right. By the time I turned my head, he was already there. Standing directly in front of me. His figure emerged from the shadows with terrifying ease, as if the darkness itself had formed into him. He wasn't panting. He wasn't even tense. He looked like he'd simply taken a stroll through the woods and ended up ahead of me by accident. I froze. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then I did the only thing I could think to do. I backed away. My heart thundered in my chest, each beat shaking through my bones as I stepped back, eyes fixed on his expressionless face. But my foot caught on something, a root, maybe, or a dip in the ground, and I lost balance. I fell again. My back hit the ground, and pain burst through my body like lightning. My hands scraped against rock and twigs, and my injured ankle twisted beneath me, sending another sharp jolt up my leg. I barely had time to register the pain before he moved. In a blink, he dropped down to one knee beside me, lowering himself until he was eye level. His face was too close, and there was something almost calm in his posture. Measured. As if he just hunted me down in the woods. "So, I have the perfect punishment for you," he said again, softer this time, almost thoughtfully. I tried to scoot back, panic rising in my throat. His hand snapped out. It caught my ankle. The injured one. I cried out sharp and raw as he yanked it toward him. The wound flared, blinding, and I lost control of my body, collapsing fully to the ground. My back hit the cold earth again. I couldn't get up. I couldn't move. And then he was on top of me. Kneeling over my waist, one knee pressing against the earth beside my ribs. His weight wasn't crushing, but it made escape impossible. His face hovered above mine, his dark hair falling forward like a curtain. Every breath he exhaled grazed my skin, cool and steady. Measured. Like he wasn't just about to kill me. Like he was going to enjoy it. "I wonder," he said, voice almost gentle, "how you taste." My mouth went dry. "I can smell it," he murmured, inhaling deeply. "Your blood. It's fresh. Sweet. Ripe with fear." He smiled. But there was nothing kind in it. "It smells good," he said again, with a low chuckle. "But would it taste good too?" Terror crushed my lungs. My arms flailed against the earth, searching for anything to defend myself, but all I found were broken twigs and cold soil. "Of course," he whispered, lowering his head closer, "it wouldn't be just a taste." He leaned in, brushing my hair back from my face with a mockery of tenderness. His pale fingers trembled just slightly like he was restraining something. "I'll drink you dry." "No please," and my voice cracked. He didn't react. His hand slid under my jaw, lifting it, exposing my throat like I was nothing more than livestock. And then he spoke again, words laced in quiet cruelty. "Let me warn you," he said, "the worst pain a human ever feels is when a vampire's fangs pierce their body for the first time." I tried to scream, but it caught halfway, stuck behind my pulse. The shock. The fire. The way your nerves scream and your soul tries to flee. "It's not like being stabbed," he went on. "It's worse. Because your body doesn't fight. It gives in. Like prey surrendering to the kill." His fingers traced the column of my throat. "You'll feel the fangs slice in deep. Right to the vein. And once I taste it," he smiled, "you'll wish you were dead." I shook my head in desperation, my entire body trembling as I tried to break free. My legs thrashed beneath him, but my strength was waning, and my injured ankle betrayed me with every movement. The sharp, searing pain radiated upward, turning my muscles to jelly and rendering my escape useless. He didn't flinch. He watched me coldly, calmly, as if my panic was nothing more than background noise, something he'd seen 1,000 times before. Then, without warning, he lowered his face toward mine. The smooth fall of his pale blonde hair framed the sharp angles of his cheekbones as his breath slid across my skin in a slow, chilling caress. And then he bit me. The pain came instantly. No warning, no build-up, just the brutal, unrelenting stab of his fangs plunging into my neck. I cried out a hoarse, broken sound, my body jolting beneath his weight. The world around me disappeared in a flood of burning agony. It was as if fire had been poured into my veins, as if every nerve in my body had been lit aflame from within. My back arched off the forest floor, then collapsed again, muscles spasming uncontrollably. My fingers clawed at the earth, trying to ground myself, to stop the torrent of pain, but there was no escaping it. It was everywhere. It consumed me. It was nothing like I'd imagined. It wasn't just a bite. It was a tearing. A pulling. As though something far deeper than blood was being wrenched from me. My memories. My emotions. My very sense of self. All of it unraveling with every pulse that left my body and entered his. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't scream anymore. My mouth hung open, my throat roar, but no sound came out. My body felt distant foreign. My limbs refused to listen. My vision flickered, the trees above warping into streaks of silver and black as the world turned on its side. And through it all, he drank. Not quickly. Not hungrily. But deliberately. Like he wanted to feel every drop. Like he needed it. The pain was unbearable. It was in my ankle, where the wound pulsed with every frantic beat of my heart. It was in my throat, where his fangs had pierced me cleanly, mercilessly. It was in my chest, where my fear thundered, loud and chaotic, against bones that couldn't hold it anymore. I was still conscious barely. My thoughts fluttered at the edges of collapse, disjointed and slippery. But I knew I was losing too much. Too fast. And then, suddenly, he stopped. Not gently. He recoiled, ripping his mouth from my neck with a sharp gasp. His body jerked backward as if he'd been struck, his lips stained red, parted in shock. His breath came in shallow bursts, uneven and quick, and he stared down at me as if seeing me for the first time. His eyes, once cold and unreadable, were wide, stunned. The glowing inhuman gleam dulled for a fraction of a second, clouded by something uncertain. He hovered above me, motionless. His hands trembled ever so slightly at his sides, but he didn't touch me again. He just looked. Looked as though he couldn't understand what he'd just done. As though something had changed. In me. In him. He wasn't looking at me with the hunger he had before. Nor the malice. Nor the authority of a prince delivering a lesson. There was confusion now. And something else. Something he didn't seem to recognize, or didn't he want to. He didn't speak. He didn't demand answers. He didn't even wipe the blood from his mouth. He simply stared. As though he was trying to piece together a puzzle that didn't fit anymore. As though whatever he'd tasted had broken the rules he'd built his world around. Why? Why had he pulled away? Why wasn't I dead? The questions circled through my head, but they were getting harder to hold on to. My body was shutting down. I tried to raise an arm, to push myself up, but the effort took everything I had and more. My strength crumbled beneath me. Too much blood. Too much fear. Too much pain. My vision swam. I saw him only vaguely now, his silhouette trembling at the edges, a phantom etched in silver moonlight. I wanted to speak. To ask what he'd done to me. Why he had stopped. Why his eyes held something like regret, or was it horror? But no words came. Only the sound of my ragged breath, growing shallower by the second. My eyelids drooped, heavy as stone. The cold seeped in. My heart, still frantic, began to fade into a slower, erratic rhythm. And then, everything disappeared. Author's POV. Aries opened her eyes slowly, blinking against the dim light. The ceiling above her was high and unfamiliar, and the heavy stillness of the room pressed in around her like a held breath. Her gaze shifted toward the tall window across the room. Darkness. It looked like night outside. Cold and endless. Soft sheets rustled beneath her as she moved. Luxurious. Thick. A world apart from the coarse dungeon floor she remembered lying on not long ago. This wasn't the cell. This room is familiar. And then it hit her. She was in Prince Emmerich's chamber. Aries sat up in a rush, heart slamming against her ribs as her eyes scanned the room in alarm. The heavy wooden furniture. The towering shelves lined with ancient books. The grand fireplace carved in black stone. All of it unmistakable. She was lying in his bed. Why? How did she get here? Her breath caught as she looked down at herself. The same clothes clung to her body, dirted, blooded, torn at the sleeves and knees. She could still feel the grit of dried earth and ash on her skin. Her ankles should be been throbbing. Her ribs should be ached. Her arms should be burned with the scratches. But nothing. No pain. Just a faint soreness at her neck. Her hand rose to it instinctively. The skin was tender. Bruised. But there was no blood. No bandage. Just a wound. Turning, she caught sight of the small mirror perched on the bedside table. Under the moonlight spilling faintly through the glass, she saw it. Twin puncture marks. Red. Clean. Still raw. He had bitten her. And yet she was alive. Why? Why had he stopped? Why had he brought her here? She blinked at her reflection. Then something made her freeze. Wait, wasn't it a rule in every tale she'd ever heard? Vampires don't have reflections. Her chest tightened. Slowly, she shifted her gaze not at herself, but behind her, to the couch across the room. He was there. Slumped back against the cushions. Barely breathing. Still. And yet. In the mirror his reflection remained. Clear. Solid. Real. She whipped around, heart pounding. The mirror hadn't lied. How was that possible? He was a vampire. Aries slid out of bed quietly, her bare feet touching the cold floor. The chamber was colder than she expected, and the silence felt deeper here, like the air itself was watching her. She stepped forward slowly, making her way toward the couch at the far end of the room, half consumed by shadows. He sat there, motionless. His head tilted to the side against the back of the seat. Was he asleep? She moved closer. Closer still. Every beat of her heart echoed in her chest, in her ears, until it was all she could hear. He didn't stir. His chest rose and fell shallowly, slowly. His eyes remained shut. She stood in front of him, barely breathing. He looked almost peaceful. Not like the monster who had chased her through the forest. Not like the prince who had sunk his fangs into her throat. And then she saw them. The burns. Angry, jagged welts stretched across his bare chest, shoulders, and collarbones. Some blistered. Others had already begun to heal. But each one looked painful, violent, fresh. She froze. What had caused them? He hadn't been wounded when she passed out. Had he? What had happened after she lost consciousness? Why had he carried her here, tended to her wound, only to end up like this? He didn't move. Didn't he open his eyes? And Aries stood there, rooted in place, facing the prince who had spared her. A monster covered in burn marks she couldn't explain. A reflection that shouldn't exist. A creature she no longer understood at all. Then his hand moved. In one swift, fluid motion, his fingers wrapped around her wrist. Her breath caught in her throat. The touch wasn't rough. Not forceful. Just firm, grounded, like an anchor pulling her down into something deeper than fear. His eyes opened slowly, revealing a shade of crimson that hadn't been there before. Not the usual obsidian. Not the ember glow. Just red. Piercing. Roar. Treat my burns, he said quietly, voice low and hoarse. Ares blinked. Who? He didn't answer. Instead, a faint shimmer of green flickered across the table beside them. Herbs fresh, crushed appeared in a small bowl, already mixed into a thick, cool paste. Apply it, he murmured again, releasing her wrist as if her compliance was already decided. And maybe it was. Her feet moved before her thoughts could catch up. She dipped her fingers into the mixture and approached him slowly. Every step reminded her of what he'd done, what he was. The chase. The bite. The forest. Harrison. She knelt beside him on the soft rug. Her knees sank into the plush fabric as her hand reached out, shaking slightly as she touched the sarv to his bare shoulder. He flinched. Barely. But it was enough to make her pause. Still, he didn't move. He just sat there silent and breathing shallowly as she began to spread the sarv along the angry burns trailing down his skin. The paste cooled under her fingertips. His skin, however, was fever-hot, almost scorching to the touch. She continued anyway, slower now. More carefully. Almost reverently. She didn't know when her hands stopped trembling. Or when her breathing had begun to mirror his. She only knew that she was still touching him long after the first burn had been soothed. And he let her. The silence between them thickened. Not tense. Not hostile. Just heavy. With things unsaid. With the weight of everything they were not supposed to be. Then his hand moved again. This time, it didn't grip or command. He merely guided her. His fingers slid over hers, moving her hand from his shoulder, across his chest over the burns, the muscle, the stillness of his body. Her hand followed, obediently or instinctively, she wasn't sure. The gesture was slow. Intentional. Sensual. Her breath caught. She didn't pull away. He released her hand, but she kept moving, tracing the sarv down the curve of his chest, over his collarbone, to the hollow space just above his ribs. His chest rose beneath her touch, not sharply in pain, but with something else. Anticipation. Tension. Sensation. When she glanced up, his gaze was fixed on her. Lidded. Intense. Crimson. She couldn't decipher the look in his eyes. Was it hunger? Weariness? Or something far more dangerous? She dipped her fingers again and moved lower, hesitating just above the defined line of his stomach. His hand found hers again. Warm. Strong. And far too gentle for the kind of monster she kept telling herself he was. Your heart is beating too loudly, he murmured, voice low barely above a whisper. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. Intimate. Disarming. The sound of his voice, deep, broken at the edges, sent a shiver down her spine. She froze, eyes wide, her heartbeat now deafening in her own ears. Of course he could hear it. Feel it. The air between them pulsed with it. And yet, his crimson eyes didn't leave hers. Not once. It's done, Ares whispered, her voice uneven as she tried to pull her hand away. But he didn't stop her. He let her go. Get the water ready for my bath, he said simply, leaning his head back against the couch. His eyes slid shut as though retreating into rest, though something told her he was far from asleep. Ares hesitated for a moment, her hands still tingling from his skin. So many questions burned in her throat. About the burns. About what happened in the forest. About why she was still alive. But she swallowed them down. She knew better now. Knew her place, knew what she was here to be. Without another word, she turned away and made her way toward the marble-walled bathroom tucked behind the black velvet curtain. Her legs still trembled slightly, but she moved with quiet resolve. She filled the large stone tub with warm water, steam rising and curling into the cold air. Her reflection shimmered in the golden water. Her fingers brushed the edge of the basin, and for just a moment, she allowed herself to breathe. Just a moment. Then she turned and returned to him. "Prince, it's done," as she said softly. He stirred, slowly rising from the couch. His movements were slower than usual, measured. He approached her, silent and unreadable. And then he said, "Birth me." Author's POV. 2 words. That was all it took to make her heart pound and her breath hitch, as if the very air had been knocked out of her lungs. Birth me. Her thoughts scattered. Her skin burned with heat that had nothing to do with the rising steam in the room. She couldn't bathe him. Because she wasn't who he thought she was. She wasn't a boy. She was a girl. A frightened, trembling girl in disguise. But before she could speak, before she could protest or run or disappear into the shadows. "Are you disobeying me already, Ares?" His voice was sharp, low, dangerous. She flinched. Her head shook on instinct, hard and fast, eyes fixed to the marble floor as her fingers twisted together anxiously. "Then come on," he said, already walking ahead, his bare feet silent against the stone. "Don't forget your duty." Ares swallowed hard, her throat dry. She tried to steady her breath as she followed him inside the bathing chamber, where the air was thick with steam and the scent of crushed lavender. Her heart nearly stopped when she heard the sound of fabric sliding down. She didn't look, didn't dare, but she knew he was removing the last of his clothes. She turned her head sharply, eyes glued to the far corner of the room. Her face flushed violently. He stepped into the bathtub, the water lapping against his legs and then his waist as he slowly lowered himself. The faintest hiss of pain escaped him as the water touched the burns along his chest and back. She stood still at the edge of the tub, biting her lower lip, fingers still nervously tangled. "Are you going to take a year before washing me?" His voice, sharp and laced with impatience, cut through the air like a blade. Ares' gaze snapped up only to find his eyes watching her through the mirror mounted across the bath. Those crimson irises had dulled now, replaced by his usual obsidian stare. Piercing. Inescapable. She hesitated, then forced her legs to move, walking slowly to his side. Her hands hovered uselessly by her sides, unsure what to touch, where to begin. She had no idea what she was doing. She'd never been this close to a man, let alone one who looked like him. So powerful. So unreadable. So bare. "Are you going to stand there forever?" he said, his tone darker now, his patience thinning. "You're testing my patience, Ares." That snapped her out of it. She dropped to her knees beside the tub, the stone floor cold against her skin, her face suddenly level with his. Too close. His face loomed near, eyes glinting with something unreadable in the low light. Steam curled between them like smoke, and for a second, she forgot to breathe. "Do I have to guide you here too?" he murmured. His voice was softer, now lower, laced with something that sent chills through her bones. Ares shook her head slowly, a barely there movement. Her voice failed her entirely. Then start already. She reached for the soaked cloth by the basin, dipped it into the water, and wrung it out with trembling hands. Her fingers brushed his arm as she brought the cloth to his shoulder, and he didn't flinch. She began to wash him. Slow, unsure strokes glided across his shoulder, down his collarbone, over the marks she avoided with careful intent. His skin was warm, too warm, like the heat of a fire just beneath the surface. His eyes didn't leave her. And though he said nothing more, though he sat still and silent, arms resting on the rim of the tub, Aries could feel the tension in the room twisting around them like a cord pulled too tight. There was nothing normal about this. Nothing safe. Every second stretched unbearably long, like the world itself was holding its breath. And yet she kept going. Her hand moved gently over his skin, washing away the soot, the blood, the sweat, carefully avoiding the burns. Because she had no choice. Because his command wasn't just a request, it was a leash. And right now, she was tethered to the most dangerous man she had ever met. Lower, he whispered suddenly, his voice slicing through the thick air. Aries froze. Her hand stalled just above his navel, and her eyes widened at the command. Lower? Her throat tightened. Her stomach twisted. I can't, as she whispered, barely audible. Silence. Then his eyes narrowed, sharp like blades. Why? His voice held no anger, but it didn't need to. The threat lived in the stillness, in the way his gaze pinned her in place. I'm sorry, Prince, I just can't, as she said in a rush, stepping back, her breath hitching in panic. Her hand trembled as she pulled it away from his body. She turned to flee, eyes blurring with panic, her entire body screaming to run. But she didn't get far. In one swift movement, his hand shot out of the water and grabbed her wrist. His strength was effortless, unyielding, and she gasped as he pulled. She slipped, her feet skidding on the wet marble, and before she could process what was happening, she was in the tub. Falling. Water splashed loudly around them. Her body landed sideways against his chest, her legs draped over the edge of the bath, her tunic soaked through in seconds. One of his arms had moved around her waist, steadying her, keeping her pressed to him in the warm water. The shock of it stole her breath. Tell me why you can't, he said, voice low, face close, too close. His wet hair clung to his skin, his jaw sharp in the candlelight, crimson glint flickering in his eyes again. Aren't you my servant? Please, please let me go, as she choked out, struggling to push against him. But it was no use. He didn't budge. Not even an inch. Why? He pressed. His arm didn't tighten, but it didn't loosen either. He was studying her now, gaze cold, calculating. Are you hiding something? No, I'm not. But her voice cracked. Just slightly. Enough. Enough to shift the energy in the room entirely. Emrique's gaze sharpened, but didn't harden. Instead, it focused like a beast sensing a tremor under the ground, not pouncing yet, but waiting. Listening. Watching. Curiosity began to unfurl in his expression, dark, keen, and utterly unsettling. Aries trembled, her entire body rigid. The weight of her soaked clothes pressed heavily against her frame, the thin fabric of her tunic clinging to her skin in all the wrong ways. She instinctively folded her arms over her chest, clutching herself tightly, heart hammering in her throat. His body was warm beneath the water, dangerously close. Too close. Every second she spent like this, the truth of her disguise felt thinner. Fragile. And then his voice came again. Low. Casual. Cruel. I just realized, he murmured, eyes lazily drifting over her soaked form. Your clothes are still filthy. Her breath caught. Shouldn't you bathe too? She froze. No. 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 Undress, he said simply. A whisper in the steam. A command draped in silk and steel. Her eyes widened, throat tightening as she instinctively tried to pull away. But his hand didn't allow it, not harshly, not yet. Just firm enough to remind her that she was still within his grasp. Princey, she stammered, voice barely a breath. Please. I gave you an order, he replied, not raising his voice. He didn't need to. His tone was smooth and unreadable, but there was something off about it. Not desire. Not dominance. Testing. Probing. You look uncomfortable, Aries, he said, tilting his head slightly. Aren't men supposed to be shameless? She swallowed hard, every nerve in her body screaming. She shook her head, shaking more from panic than defiance. Are you modest now? His gaze flicked to the way she held her arms across her chest. Why? She couldn't answer. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. He leaned closer. The steam curled around his face like smoke. His voice dropped, dangerously soft. What are you hiding? Author's POV. What are you hiding? He asked, eyes narrowing ever so slightly. Her throat closed. She shook her head. I'm not hiding anything, Prince, as she whispered. He didn't blink. Didn't speak. Just watched. The silence dragged until it suffocated her. And then he let go. Leave. The word dropped like a blade. She scrambled to get out of the tub, her body slick with water, clothes heavy and sticking to her skin. She nearly slipped climbing over the rim, but caught herself on the nearby shelf. Her bare feet squelched against the cold floor as she backed out of the steamy room, soaked from shoulder to ankle. Once outside, she leaned against the wall, gasping softly. Her hands clutched her arms as water dripped onto the floor beneath her, forming a small puddle around her bare feet. Her mind raced. Why would he ask me that? Did he see something? Did he touch me while I was unconscious? No, that wouldn't happen. Right? The fear curled tightly in her chest. Her secret had lived safe beneath years of discipline and bindings. But now it felt dangerously close to unraveling. She remembered the words her father had always told her. Not once. Not just in passing. But every single day. Every night before bed. Every time she left the house, even if it was only to fetch herbs or help clean armor in the training yard. His voice echoed in her mind now, firm and sharp as iron. And no one, and I mean no one, Aries. No one should know your truth. Your identity. Your secret. Promise me. He would kneel down to her height when he said it, his hands gripping her shoulders not harshly, but with a pressure that told her how serious he was. His eyes, always kind, would harden then. Like he was seeing the world not for what it was, but for how dangerous it could become the moment someone found out what she really was. Promise me, Aries. She always had. With a nod. With trembling lips. Sometimes with a stubborn pout when she was younger, not fully understanding the weight of it, but she always promised. And now, standing here in soaking clothes, her heart racing from Emrique's nearness, the bite on her neck still tingling like a brand, she realized. She was slipping. The lines were blurring. One wrong move, one wrong word, and that secret would unravel. and with it, everything her father had sacrificed to keep her safe. She looked down at herself. Her tunic clung to her body in places it shouldn't. She needed to change. She had to. But she couldn't just leave. Not without permission. She stood there, shivering slightly from the cold air sweeping in through the open window. The shadows of the room felt heavier now. Every second of silence weighed more than the last. Then the door creaked. She looked up. Prince Emmerich emerged from the bathroom, steam curling faintly around him. A towel was loosely wrapped around his waist, riding low across his hips. His pale hair, damp from the bath, framed his sharp features and fell across his shoulders in wet strands. Her gaze dropped instantly, burning with shame. She couldn't look at him like that. She shouldn't. Princey, she began, voice hesitant, barely above a whisper. My clothes are wet, I need to change. He said nothing. I'll need to go to the men's bathing quarters. For a clean uniform. Still, silence. Then he walked toward her. 1 step. 2. She retreated, heart hammering, with footsteps slapping softly against the stone floor. The air felt charged. Her breath caught in her throat. Another step. And another. Her back struck a table behind her. A sharp clatter split the air, ceramic shattered against the floor. The vase. A sharp sting lanced through Ari's foot. Ar! She cried out as the broken vase scattered at her feet. A jagged shard had sliced clean across the top of her foot. She stumbled back, barely keeping her balance as pain bloomed with every heartbeat. Blood began to well, seeping between her toes and onto the cold floor. Before she could fully register what had happened, Emmerich moved. Without a word, he stepped forward and bent down, his arms sliding beneath her knees and back. She gasped. In one smooth motion, he lifted her. Bridal style. Her wet form pressed against his bare chest as he stood with no sign of effort, only a faint sigh of irritation escaping his lips. Prince Ishi stammered, hands scrambling to find somewhere safe to rest that wasn't his skin. What are you doing? He didn't answer. His expression remained unreadable, jaw tense as he walked across the room, water from her soaked clothes dripping down his chest. She felt the heat of him, the strength in his arms, and the way her own body trembled involuntarily against him. She panicked. Please put me down, she said, louder now. The trembling in her voice was more from anxiety than pain. I can walk, Emmerich finally looked down at her, one brow rising slowly. A smirk tugged at the corner of his lips. Okay. And just like that, he dropped her. Not with cruelty, but not gently either, like someone discarding something unimportant. Her feet hit the ground hard, and the pain in her wounded foot made her gasp sharply. As she yelped, instinctively clutching at his arm for balance. His gaze dropped to her hands now holding onto him tightly, her body leaning into his again. He gave a slow, almost mocking nod. That's what I thought. His tone was calm. Too calm. Before she could protest again, he scooped her back up less gently this time. One hand behind her shoulders, the other beneath her knees, as if she weighed nothing more than air. She opened her mouth, but the words died on her tongue. He didn't speak. Didn't he look at her again? He just carried her, his grip firm, skin warm, his breath ghosting against her wet cheek as he made his way back to the bedroom. And this time, she didn't fight. She couldn't because in that moment, she wasn't sure which hurt more, her bleeding foot, her shattered pride, or the terrifying realization that he always got the last word. Author's POV. Emmerich didn't he say another word as he walked toward the sitting area, carrying her like she weighed nothing. But instead of heading to the bed, he stopped beside one of the high-backed chairs near the table and gently lowered her into it. The motion was careful, too careful, as if he was afraid she might break. Before she could speak, he turned and sat on the table directly in front of her, his pale chest still damp, his towel wrapped securely at his hips. Then his eyes dropped to her foot. "Hold still," he said, voice cool and quiet. With a flick of his fingers, a bowl of clean water and a folded cloth appeared on the table beside him, along with a small glass jar of dark sarve. He dipped the cloth into the water, wrung it out, and without warning, reached down and gently took her injured foot into his lap right onto his thigh. Aries flinched at the contact, but he seem to notice. Or didn't he care? She watched, frozen, as he carefully dabbed at the blood, cleaning the wound where the shard of glass had sliced her skin. The sting made her suck in a sharp breath, but he stop. His fingers were deft, silent, steady. "You said you're not kind," as she muttered, barely louder than a whisper. "I'm not," he replied, not looking up. "Then why are you doing this?" He paused, only for a breath. "Because if a vampire catches the scent of your blood, they'll devour you without hesitation." "And why would you care?" That made him look up. Slowly, Emmerich's dark lashes lifted and his eyes still that bottomless obsidian met hers. A hint of amusement tugged at one corner of his mouth, but it didn't reach his gaze. "Let us just say," he leaned forward slightly, voice dropping, "I own my servants. And if anyone else touches what's mine, they're of no use to me anymore." Own. The word echoed in her chest like a bell tolling too deep, too cold. It made her feel small. Smaller than she'd ever felt before. Just hours ago, she had run through the forest trying to escape death. And now she was here sitting in front of the man who almost killed her, while he treated her like a possession. Not a person. Just a servant. She looked away, trying to suppress the sting building behind her eyes. She shouldn't cry. Not now. Not in front of him. "You're done," Emmerich said after a moment, his voice shifting back to that cold, impassive edge that made it impossible to tell what he was thinking. He gently placed her foot down on the table and stood, brushing his hands on the towel around his waist like he just touched her skin like none of it meant anything. And yet, Aries' foot still tingled where his fingers had lingered. Her chest ached tight and sore not from pain, but from something worse. Something unnamed. "Why is this happening to me, Father? Why do I have to do this? I don't think I can handle all of this at once." The thoughts screamed in her head, louder than her heartbeat. A single tear slipped down her cheek before she wiped it away quickly with the back of her hand. She wouldn't cry, not here. Not in his room. Not in front of him. She placed her foot carefully on the floor and tried to rise, still stiff and sore. But just as she began to push herself up, the door opened again. Emmerich returned, now clothed in dark trousers and barefoot, his long pale hair damp and resting against his bare shoulders. In his arms, he carried folded garments. She froze. "What are you doing?" he asked, eyes narrowing ever so slightly. I was just," she began, startled. But he cut her off as if her answer didn't matter. "Wear this. I had a servant bring a fresh uniform." He held out a clean tunic and trousers, standard garments for male staff. Just like the ones she wore before, though less torn, less blood-stained. She reached out slowly and took them from him, her hands trembling slightly. "Change," he said flatly. Her eyes shot up to his, panic flaring in her chest. "Here." In front of him? He stared for a heartbeat longer, as though he could hear the fear in her mind. Then, without a word, he turned away. "I'll be in my office," he added over his shoulder, before walking through the door at the back of the room. The moment it shut behind him, she let out a breath of shaky relief. But that calm shattered as a new realization hit her. Wait, what about my linen? Her bindings. They were soaked from the bath, clinging and heavy beneath her tunic. She couldn't wear them again. And she couldn't go out without one, or he'd know. No, this can't be happening. Think. Aries. Think. She closed her eyes, rifling through her memories, and then it struck her. The day Wyatt spilled blood on her uniform, she had changed into her spare linen. The one still clean was hidden in the folded clothes she de-stuffed beneath the cot. She limped quickly toward the bed, biting down a cry as her foot protested. Ignoring the pain, she dropped to her knees and reached beneath the frame. Her fingers found the stiff fabric of her old clothes. The dusty, blood-stained uniform, and yes, tucked within it, the extra linen wrap. She pulled it out, pressing it to her chest in relief before shoving the old uniform back under the bed and rising again. Crossing the room quickly, she placed the fresh clothes on the table. Then she paused, heart pounding again. This next part had to be fast. Careful. Quiet. She unfastened the drawstring of her old trousers and slid them down, stepping out of them gingerly. Then came the tunic, damp, crumpled, heavy with water. She peeled it off slowly, her fingers numb. Underneath, the soaked linen clung to her chest like a second skin. Her breath caught. She looked toward the door once, just to be sure. Then she unwrapped the binding from around herself, the fabric dragging across her ribs with a wet sound. Her arms trembled as she worked, heart thudding in her ears. When it was finally off, she grabbed the dry linen and wrapped it tightly securely just as her father had taught her. Tucking the end in place, she quickly pulled on the fresh tunic and trousers, adjusting the fit. Only once everything was on did she allow herself to breathe. The mirror on the bedside table caught her reflection. Her cheeks were flushed, strands of dark hair clinging to her temple. But the disguise it held. She looked like a boy again. At least for now. She glanced at the bundle of discarded clothes beside the bed, the torn, blooded tunic and trousers from the dungeon, and sitting among them, soaked through and clinging to itself like a second skin, was her linen wrap. Her eyes locked on it. Not the uniform. That didn't matter. But the linen, if anyone saw that, if he saw that. Panic twisted in her stomach. She bent down quickly, heart racing, and shoved the wet linen beneath the bed, fingers pressing it into the dark space behind the cot. She made sure it was wedged far back, tucked out of sight, hidden in the shadows. Only then did she exhale. She turned her attention back to the ruined uniform. Unlike the linen, this she could deal with. She glanced around and spotted a small folding rack near the fireplace, likely used for cloaks or towels. She picked up the wet tunic and trousers and quietly walked over, draping them over the bars of the rack, closest to the fire. The fabric clung cold to her hands before she let go. With the evidence drying, the linen hidden, and her new uniform clinging tight, she stood in the center of the room. And waited. Because hiding the truth wasn't over. It never would be. Aries. Her head snapped up at the sound of his voice, sharp and commanding, coming from the office room adjacent to the bedroom. Now what? She thought, exhaling slowly. Still limping slightly, she crossed the cold floor and stepped into the office. The moment she entered, her eyes found him seated behind a large desk, still shirtless. The soft candlelight in the room cast flickering shadows across his chest, catching on the faint red welts that hadn't completely faded. His hair was damp, falling loose around his shoulders. He looked up from the papers in his hand. "Come here," he said. His tone was casual, but there was something in the way he said it measured, like he was testing something. Aries walked forward carefully, rounding the side of the table until she stood within reach, but still a safe distance away. Then he looked directly at her. "I heard you took the advisor's exam," he said, a small smirk curving his lips before he quickly masked it with indifference. But Aries had seen it. Caught the faint glimmer of amusement in his eyes. Her heart thudded. Now what is he trying to do? "Yes," she said carefully. "Good. Then look at these." He slid a stack of papers across the desk toward her. "This is a record of blood supply expenses across the past 3 months. Do you see any irregularities in this chart?" She stepped closer, leaning down slightly to get a better look at the documents. Her eyes scanned the neat columns and hand-drawn graphs, numbers listed in detail. But before she could process much, he moved. Without a sound, Emmerich stood up, placing his hand flat on the table beside her, effectively caging her in. Her breath caught in her throat. The sudden proximity made the air feel thicker. She could feel the heat of his bare skin just inches from her back. His presence was overwhelming, heavy, like gravity pulling her in. She turned slightly, only to realize his face was much closer than expected. His sharp, unreadable gaze bore down on her. "What?" he asked, voice low. "Tell me." Her voice faltered. Her throat felt tight. She couldn't concentrate on the chart, not with him this close. He leaned in, his lips brushing close to her ear. "Take your time." A shiver ran down her spine. What is he trying to do to me? She straightened abruptly, trying to step away, but he moved with her, his other hand slamming down on the opposite side of the table, boxing her in completely. She froze. "Prince Emmerich, what are you doing?" He tilted his head slightly, watching her. "What? You're trying to run again?" he said, feigning innocence. "I asked a simple question. And if you can't even answer that, how exactly were you supposed to become a court advisor?" His voice was smooth but edged with mockery. Aries kept her gaze fixed downward, trying to avoid the piercing intensity of his stare. But it didn't help. He reached out, fingers curling under her chin, lifting her face to meet his. Her heart pounded so hard she was sure he could hear it. "Or," he said softly, "am I wrong?" She shook her head quickly, avoiding his eyes, swallowing hard, but then she caught the shift in his expression. Something darker flickered behind his eyes. And then, with the same unreadable calmness, he asked, "Have you ever had sex?" Author's POV. Have you ever had sex? Emmerich asked. Aries froze. The question cracked like a whip through the silence. Her thoughts scattered instantly, and her heart pounded so loudly it almost drowned everything else out. She stared at him in disbelief, her lips parted, but no words came. Sex? Of all things, why that? Was this a threat? A trap? A cruel joke? His lips curved slightly, but there was no amusement in his eyes. No mischief. Only heat tightly controlled, simmering beneath a surface of steel. His gaze pinned her like prey. The hand on her chin slipped lower, sliding with deliberate slowness to her throat. Not to hurt, not yet, just to feel the way she swallowed under his palm. He stepped in, close enough that his breath touched her face. Close enough that she had nowhere left to lean, but back until the edge of the table caught her behind her thighs. You didn't answer me, Aries, he said softly, dangerously. Does the question scare you? His lips brushed the shell of her ear. Or the answer? She tensed, her breath catching. Panic prickled along her spine. Princey, she managed to say, barely a whisper. Why would you ask something like that? I don't see how that has anything to do with these charts. She lifted her hands quickly, pressing them against his chest in a desperate attempt to create space. He was warm, far too warm and hard beneath her palms. Solid. Unmoving. He should have been cold. But under her hands, he felt warm like something barely tethered to human heat. Like his anger, or something darker, had stirred the witch inside him to life. Please, she murmured, voice barely audible. I don't, this isn't he. But her words broke off when his arm moved. The hand braced beside her slid around to her waist, gripping firmly. In one fluid motion, he pulled her closer, so close her legs bumped into his. Her hands, still resting on his chest, were caught awkwardly between them. She tried to push again, but it was no use. She didn't dare use force. Her palms remained pressed against him, tense and unmoving, fingers slightly curled as if unsure whether to fight or freeze. Her body shifted as he drew her up just slightly enough to seat her halfway onto the table. Her breath hitched. She could feel the pressure of his body, of her own restraint, the cold press of fear in her chest. And then his other hand moved. The one at her throat slid upward, fingers curling under her jaw before slipping into her hair. He gripped the back of her head, firm but careful, tilting her face up toward his until their eyes locked so close now, she could see it. The flicker of amber in his irises. Like flame behind obsidian. Oh, it matters, he murmured. Because there's a new lore. Her breath stalled. Her hands, still trapped awkwardly against his chest, trembled, not knowing whether to push him away or hold on just to steady herself. She couldn't look away even if she tried. His grip in her hair tightened slightly, controlling but not cruel, just enough to let her know she couldn't move. His voice dropped again, barely more than a whisper now, like he was drawing the tension out just to watch her unravel. A lore that requires all male servants to donate blood. The words echoed in her ears. Her stomach twisted. Her body went cold. Donate blood? No. That couldn't be right. That wasn't how the palace operated. Male servants were never included in blood donations, only females. This wasn't a routine check. This wasn't official. This was something else. Her voice came out shaky, broken around the edges. But aren't servants who are men not supposed to give blood? That's what the lore has always. She stopped mid-sentence. Because he laughed. Softly. Cruelly. A low, mocking sound that made her skin crawl. Did you not hear me, Ares? He asked, the smirk returning to his lips but not to his eyes. I said it's a new lore. She swallowed hard. The air between them had gone heavier, hotter. Every breath she took was shallow now. Her legs dangled helplessly from the edge of the table, her hands still pinned between them. His chest rose and fell under her trembling fingers, steady and unbothered. And then he leaned closer. Close enough that his lips nearly brushed hers when he spoke. So let me ask again. His grip in her hair tightened, not painfully, but enough to tilt her chin back and keep her eyes locked on his, trapped in the storm behind his gaze. Have you ever had sex before? Ares's breath hitched. Her lips parted, but no words came out at first. Her heart slammed against her ribcage, the question echoing louder now in the charged silence. She could lie, she should lie. But her mouth moved on its own. What, happens if I say yes? She asked, her voice low, trembling but careful. His eyes darkened. For a beat, he didn't speak. His expression didn't shift, but something colder passed through him, like a shadow. Then, he said, voice smooth, almost too smooth, you'd be appointed as a servant to a vampire who prefers blood from non-virgins. He said it like it was standard policy, like it had always been this way. But it hadn't. Aries didn't know that. Because the truth was, there was no virginity-based rule. The lore was real. Yes, young male servants under 20 were now required to donate blood. But those older than that? They were sold, passed off to wealthy vampires who paid handsomely for mature blood. Age was the measure. Not purity. Not sex. But she didn't know that. And Emmerich wasn't about to tell her. Because he was testing her. Pushing her into a corner. Watching her every blink, every swallow to see if she flinched. If she lied. If she'd finally break under the pressure of his gaze. Her stomach churned. She had no idea if such a rule really existed, or if this was something he'd made up, but she knew this much. He was watching her reaction, not her answer. Looking for hesitation. For guilt. For a slip. Her mouth was suddenly dry. Is that supposed to be a punishment? She asked softly, trying to keep her tone even. Or just a transfer? Emmerich's lips twitched, not into a smile, but something colder. Calculated. He leaned in again, his voice a whisper just beneath her ear. Let us just say the ones who lie never end up where they think they will. Aries' POV. Let us just say the ones who lie never end up where they think they will. My breath hitched. Because now I knew. He knew. He wasn't just testing me, he was toying with me. Circling around the truth like a predator who already saw through the illusion. And now he was playing with me. I am a... The words caught in my throat. What was I supposed to say? That yes, I'm a virgin, and then offer up my blood to these monsters who destroyed our kind, our lives, our entire human race? Or say I'm not and be handed over directly to a vampire who prefers blood from non-virgins? One who would bite me, drink from me. With teeth and breath and no distance at all. Either way I had to give. There was no choice in it. But at least with one maybe they'd just take a vial. Maybe I wouldn't have to feel it. That's not so bad, right? My thoughts spun violently, tearing through my head as his grip on my waist tightened. It jolted me out of my trance, forcing me to look up again straight into his eyes. His expression hadn't softened. If anything, it sharpened. Waiting. Judging. I am a virgin, I whispered. The words barely made it out. They were raw. Humiliating. And terrifying. His lips curved into something cruel. Amused. Then he stepped back. Finally. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding, chest rising as relief filled me like a wave too fast, too soon. Because then he said, okay then. If you're a virgin, he drawled, let me explain the rules for when you go for your blood donation. Rules? I blinked up at him, confused. What do you mean, rules? He smiled again, but it wasn't kind. There was something sharp in his eyes now. Calculating. The way a butcher examines a slab of meat before cutting. You see, Aries vampires prefer the blood of a human who is a virgin. Preferably a woman, of course. He tilted his head slightly, watching me too closely. But given the shortage lately, we can't afford to be picky. Which is why I made this new law. Every male servant, virgin or not, must now donate. I swallowed hard. But, he continued, we can't just take your word for it, now, can we? My blood ran cold. He stepped closer again, just a little. Enough to make the tension return like a blade pressed to my ribs. We can't have male servants lying to avoid donation, especially those claiming to be virgins to escape certain fates. I couldn't breathe. So, he said, softly now. There's a simple way to keep things in order. A test. My mouth went dry. A test? He nodded. A virginity test, he said simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Before your blood is accepted, you'll be examined. Physically. He let that sink in. My heart dropped. I've already informed the physician, he added, watching me carefully. Every male servant claiming virgin status will be verified. And once cleared, they'll be allowed to donate in a controlled setting. And if not? I asked, my voice barely audible. His eyes gleamed with a flicker of dark amusement. If not, he said, stepping back at last, you'll be assigned to a vampire who prefers direct feedings from non-virgins. My knees nearly gave out. Assigned? Like property? To be fed on directly? A virginity test? The words twisted in my mind like thorns. I gripped the edge of the table, the wood biting into my palms as I tried to breathe through the panic. How was I supposed to parse something like that? They'd know. The moment they touched me, examined me, they'd see what I was hiding. That I wasn't a boy. That I didn't belong here. My chest tightened painfully. And worse than that, I could already feel his eyes on me. Watching. Measuring. Like a predator sensing fear in its prey. I swallowed, my voice barely holding. Why are you doing this? He didn't blink. Didn't flinch. Just stared at me like I was an insect he wasn't sure whether to kill or keep. Because I don't like liars, he said. That was it. No cruelty in his tone. No mockery. Just a simple, cold fact that cut deeper than any accusation. It wasn't about the test. It was about the lie I carried like a second skin. And he knew. Even if he didn't have proof, he knew. Then he stepped forward again, closing the distance between us, and the air grew heavier. Thicker. Like the gravity around him was stronger than anywhere else in the room. In less than 5 hours, he said, voice low and precise, you'll be sent to the blood donation center. Along with the other male servants. His hands braced the table on either side of me, boxing me in. I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. The warmth of his body soaked into mine without even touching. Got it? I nodded, heart racing, trying to hold myself together. But something made me speak, something reckless that escaped before I could stop it. Which do you prefer? His body stilled. His gaze sharpened like a blade drawn from its sheath. What? Do you prefer the blood from virgins or non-virgins? His lips curved, just barely, not a smile. Something darker. Amused, maybe. Intrigued. I prefer both, he murmured, voice like velvet and fire, but I prefer to drink it directly from a source. His breath brushed my cheek. My skin tingled. Then, without warning, he grabbed a handful of my hair and yanked my head back. I gasped, my eyes meeting his. I tried not to stare at his bare chest, at the curve of his collarbone, at the faint lines of burns still not fully healed. But I could feel his skin so close. His heat. The intensity in his gaze. He leaned down. Slowly. Deliberately. His lips hovered over the mark on my neck. Right here, he whispered. And then he licked it. Soft. Slow. Possessive. I flinched, breath catching in my throat. My hands flew to his chest, not to push him away, but to steady myself. He was too close. Too warm. Too much. Or here, he whispered again, trailing his lips down my throat. Feather light. Sinful. His hand slid from my hair to the back of my neck, and he pulled me into him until my chest grazed his. He bit down. Lightly. Not enough to pierce, but enough to claim. And then his other hand moved. Lower. Down the curve of my spine, tracing every dip and shape until it found my waist. My breath hitched. His fingers grazed the hem of my tunic and then slipped beneath. My stomach clenched. His palm flattened against my side. My breath stopped completely. He was moving upward. Slowly. Too slowly. Each second burned. His hand slid up over my ribs, past the faint curve of bone and higher. I froze. My eyes flew open. He was inches away from discovering everything. His fingers were too close to the linen binding my chest. Just one more inch and... The doorbell rang. The sound shattered the moment. He stilled. I felt the hesitation ripple through him, his breath catching against my throat. And then, slowly, he pulled away. His eyes locked onto mine. No apology. No anger. Just silence. Go open the door, he said. I nodded quickly, too shaken to speak. I slid off the table only to hiss in pain the moment my foot hit the ground. The gash. My knees buckled and then suddenly, his arms were around me. Strong. Steady. He caught me before I could fall. Careful, he murmured. Not softly. Not cruelly. Just firmly. Like he always did. Commanding. In control. I nodded again, not daring to meet his gaze. I felt raw. Exposed. Burning. When he was certain I could stand, he let go. And I walked toward the door, legs trembling beneath me. I didn't look back. But I could still feel the imprint of his touch on my waist. Still feel the echo of his mouth on my skin. And all I could think over and over was that if I didn't escape this soon, he wouldn't need a test. He'd already know. Everything.